And welcome to
smoke already.
Portal Mountain, development meeting number 80, I believe.
It is a part 3.
It's actually technically, but I think we can say that it's moving on because we were doing a little series here, beginning with the ontology of myth, so getting into like mechanics, specific mechanics of stacking of animism, how layers emerge, and we're describing like say life on Earth as being molecules bathed by the sun, and how complexity stacks and keeps going through history and all this kind of stuff.
To be honest, we skipped on most of the technical aspects of how the stack is getting built. We kind of just said it does. However, there is a basis behind that conversation. I just wanted to mention it real quick. Long story short, it's been from a white paper of a specific software that I won't name by brand at this point. But it had some really cool, solid ideas on how to build such a stack software-wise, involving protocol signals, all that ontological lingo.
And I guess being a programmer yourself, to see something laid out in programming language makes it much more discrete. Like you're having ones and zeros move. It's not a wishy-washy.
The point is that there's a real technical description behind how to actually correlate one layer to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, and it is a functional idea.
Yeah.
So we didn't.
It was like the idea of, like, say on the internet, as a member of a network, you as an individual contain the network within yourself.
Yeah, that's the gist of it. That's the gist of it. There's a few specific components. There is like your networking, your
and this is how the network emerges.
System. So there's the strange loop involvement in the stack. And a whole bunch of technical details that if we were to go into, it's going to be 3 or 4 episodes of describing that software system.
Don't need to, but
so it's not out of nowhere. True. That's really the key there. It's been stated, but it's not been described. I'd like to admit to that.
Sure, cool. I appreciate. We did get into a lot of specifics, like painting a model level picture of
that.
Just to try and give an idea.
Our picture of ontology is basically the finished concrete idea that assumes all of these pieces are working. Longest source, like if we were to have those pieces and to describe those pieces, we would describe how they put together and recreate the exact picture we were just talking about. So rather than do that, we just created the picture. So if necessary, we can go into it. But right now...
and as usual, this is a casual development meeting. We're just chatting, so it's not like we're filling in every single blank at every possible point. We're not going for that kind of rigor right now. Right.
And we also have a few bits and pieces from that framework making their way into our explanations. Things like upload, download, medium, those kinds of stacking.
And being meeting number 80, for any of these concepts, you can go back and find out pretty much an episode or two on any single word, like one of these terms.
Yeah, exactly. So we're kind of going to go off of the built picture, chunk it.
Lately I was just trying to summarize what we were doing the last few meetings, so that we can say that we're building off that. So we're doing the ontology, and then the myth.
Yeah, those are the key components. The 2 layers that we're trying to say are, like, we have our ontology, we have the mythology happening within the ontology, and in fact we have a picture here that you can't see at the moment, but it kind of helps us to navigate the conversation, right?
So myth and ontology.
I'll show it a little bit. So we have this.
You can try.
Yeah,
get it in focus. This is our scratch notes.
A doodle.
From the last half hour or so.
Yeah,
actually, we could have started earlier, but we were just kind of chatting and enjoying our beverages.
Yeah, so the point of this picture, I'll just leave it on for a little longer. You could pause it or something if you need to. So there's a few components.
I don't know if it's in focus. Maybe it's... But there's also... this is in the way.
Yeah, it's... There's a few components to this map. What we were focusing is at the top of.
Oh, I see what you're just trying to get that part.
Yeah. Yeah, we're trying to like.
I don't know if it's gonna work, but
So what we're trying to get to is that in the last two parts, we've described this part of our little drawing here, and that's basically the what, the playing field with which
these
we're
kind of
talking about.
squiggly mountain things.
Yeah, those are our stacks.
We were trying to set up this idea of like a topographical sort of.
Yeah, mountains, hills, all of that. So we have a side view there. We
Right.
have like squiggles to indicate for resonant wakes, what they like, how they play into this.
Right.
We have an arrow pointing to the medium, allowing us to like sort of navigate how resonant wakes work, and that's going back to the technical definitions of stacking and all of that stuff that we didn't cover. And then that's the what. And we're going to try to move now into the why. Why do we have an ontology, a mythology about ontology, a mythology about mythology? Where is this all going? What?
Mm-hmm.
Now that we have this setup,
So I like that you
what's the stage?
made that pivot point from what to why. The last three meetings,
We had
we
that
did
pivot point in those
ontology
as well.
of myth. That was this
interesting.
kind of more technical thing. Then we tried doing the myth of ontology. So like, what is it to take on this kind of belief, quote unquote, that there is this sort of animistic stacking of layers, and like the world around us is like all sharing in media, like, you know what I mean, like that
Shooting
the myth.
energy at each other.
But we ended
itself.
up for that, we tried to do the myth. We ended up building ontology again. So that's part one of this myth of ontology. And then I think like we just ended at kind of like this idea, like the myth as being more significant, it's what we experience more naturally.
Right.
Whereas the ontology, we don't experience it naturally. It's taken as the base reality of what's existing, but we can switch our cognitive alignment to perceive that as our myth level. We bring the abstract up into that view of
So if I may fix it up a little bit visually.
reality.
So if we picture ontology at the bottom as a layer and myth on top as a layer, all of our perceptive cognitive doings, if you will, are in the myth layer. So in an effort to recognize what the ontological layer that the myth is working on, it has to have counterparts, reflections, if you will, within the mythology. And that's how the mythology connects all the bits and pieces together.
We always get some kind of crazy thumbnail. Yeah, so things happen, we experience them naturally in the normal cognitive way from a mythical perspective, in that
And it's like a horizon.
the ontology is taken as reality. We're not really dissecting that.
A given part of the myth.
It's a given.
It's like bits and pieces of the myth are the ontology. Narratives within mythology are of the ontology. That's how the myth reflects on ontology. Then the myth
And
will
we
also
never
reflect
have
on
a full
itself.
picture. We never get a full picture. It's always tidbits from here and there. So it's almost more like just a feeling of this
A perception, yes.
immersion.
Well, that's going far, but yeah.
What naturally
Naturally would
Could be-
should
would
have
be.
been if you will go with our model in its accelerated format. That would be correct. So here's a great
Sure.
here's a great
As
definition
opposed to
for
psychosis. So that's the title of today's
Grand Mastery is our format of
Meeting.
acceleration. Haha.
Sure.
Anyway,
Now we can get into accelerationism. I think we did once or twice.
it's going to come up. Actually, accelerationism is useful for talking about psychosis. Because
I think it's pretty far off.
Each psychosis
So
can
hold
be
on.
accelerated.
Can we just slow down
Because
a
it's bound
bit?
to a narrative. Yeah.
Because I'm like struggling to try and get through like an intro, just so like we can establish that here's what we've been doing. Here's what we're gonna do.
All right.
And
So we're
keep
gonna
like explaining and explaining, just ripping into everything.
Okay. So we have established that we have an ontology, a mythology. Those are the technical constituents of our layering system. And now we're going to delve into how combined they make up the dream. Right? The what, the why. Why are we discussing that? Because we want to discuss what the dream is. So our why is another what, in a sense. But besides that,
Right. So, more context. The second part of so this is the last meeting. I think we did get into more like the proper myth side of things, like the actual more experience of it. I felt like we kind of did it justice, and I think it's good that we're moving on to a new title here, Psychosis of Reality, because we can only go so far in describing the myth without kind of jumping up a layer somehow. And what bundles these together, what we've been discussing, the ontology and the myth. These are two myths.
Right now.
We've alluded to that there's a brain mechanical structure which is in its myth sense looking at both ontology and myth through myth, right?
Yeah,
ontology
that's
and myth through myth, right? So there's like
that's the mechanism.
So we've explained or discussed ontology and myth. Now we have to go through myth. What is it that we mean, like the through myth part? So this is Psychosis of Reality.
So I'll try to connect myth both to the dream and the I guess just the dream.
Myth and ontology to the dream, or the myth.
So it's something to that effect.
Let's not trip too far.
So, in its essence, the dream is like what you have, where you have a run-in mythology in an ontology, like the full thing together, running, intertwined, connected, interconnected, and all of that stuff. Like the machine, the full machine.
I wonder if we should pull up those, like the big chart in that. Well, I guess we're okay. But
now
we would refer to the big chart.
We'll need another word here to connect a couple of things. That's narrative. Myth is a narratological collection of sound bites, right? Like it's like a sound bite of sound bites of sound bites of sound bites, which is itself a narrative of narratives of narratives of narratives.
Right.
The dream, broken up by moment, in our other modeling situation, broken up into moments, creates a series of moments that are what we call narrative.
Actually, this is just the center of the big chart, narrative.
Yeah, so that's the connecting word between myth and dream.
Let's get the YouTube.
Myth and dream. That's the connective words. Like they're both narratives, or meta narratives, or hyper narratives. So, incidentally, this connection also has, as you mentioned, the big diagram, the dream diagram. That diagram in particular is about the abstract, mimetic, concrete, and the narrative layers, shared layers. So there's a connection to the neurochemical operating system, its own stack.
And what were you saying is related to that?
So there's a big connection between myth, narrative, dream, composed of moments that string out into narratives, right? So dream, myth are connected, and at the same time the connection is running through the big chart, which is layering out the neurochemical operating system. So this is what's happening in the abstract, this is the concrete part, this is the mimetic side of it. If you remember the concentric circles in the diagram.
Sorry, I got distracted again.
Pull up our images. Imgur.
Yeah, I was going to find some like the charts.
Yeah, pull
keep.
If you remember,
we need to slow down here maybe a little bit. Just chill out.
The only message to take out is that we have a connective word called narrative. It links mythology to dream. It also links up what we're talking about to the neurochemical operating system as a whole. And so that's an important one because we're actually see, in the narrative, the horizon is saying we're in the myth, and our object is the ontology. That's the same horizon. So I'm not sure if that's clear to anybody else listening, but at least I hope I made that clear to you.
April 7. I just want to make a folder here and throw some images in there. I think we might do a desktop share just because it, I don't know, it might be helpful. There's a ton of charts
You know
here,
what?
like
You
at least
set
to
that up.
reference.
You set that up. I'll be right back.
So we're still really trying to get set up here, actually, with a decent intro. And hopefully we'll be able to get into the meat of discussion soon. I'm just going to put together a collection of charts we can share with you guys. And these are all available. Currently there's a link to Imageer from the Portal Mountain website. That's the URL, portalmounta.in. And you can click on tables and charts or whatever it is at the top. Charting it up. Charts be piling. We're still on.
I just realized something.
What?
No ego, no charlatan. The charlatan is only in reference to... No, sorry. No soul, no charlatan. The charlatan is only there to give to the lack.
Mm-hmm.
No lack,
Right.
nothing to give to.
Can't be controlled.
That's what I meant. So it's not like there's no charlatans in the world. It's in the same way that when you the bodhisattva thing, when you truly realize you have saved all beings, you realize there are no beings to save. Sort of mentality.
Correct.
Okay, not that. This can come up. I think it'll be too far.
Yeah.
Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. This, for sure.
Yep.
This
is
the it.
I already got the full picture of that one.
That's good.
Kind of grabbing a whole pile, but do we need? I don't think we don't need to get into this.
We might just touch on these
final
things.
graphics, but
Like if we were touching on anything to do with ego, we're gonna have to go into ego discussions. So right now we're in dream ontology.
goes without saying.
It to get to dream, to get to ego, you'll need to go through dream, through ontology, to do a self, through self-reference, through conceit. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
There's so many things to build up to it. It's just like probably not worth talking about ego
Mm-hmm.
right now.
Yep. Correctimus.
Too much model.
Alright, so let's just open a few of these NCOS layers. We can open the zoom on the big
That's just more for reference than anything else. It's just incidentally there.
card diagram.
That's our simplified version of what we're talking about there. Which also includes fiat, by the way.
Got some other charts here, like affect and stuff. I don't know if we need any of that.
Moment in dream is really fundamental to the current
A moment. Yep.
current moment of the dream.
Indeed.
So yeah, we'll literally spent 2 meetings trying to nail down the car diagram, and now we're trying to figure out how to give that mythology relevance. What's next?
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
the big chart is going to be like the big connector.
Let's just see if this is working. For this, we may want. I don't know. Like, what chart? Let's just pull one
Big
up.
chart. Big circle.
Which
Big.
part of it?
This
This
one.
one, or
Yeah,
the?
this one.
This is just a chunk of it.
Yeah, it's fine. This is the chunk that I was actually.
See, now I can't see
You'll notice
what's on screen, so I gotta.
You'll notice a couple of specific wordings there. Abstract face space is a layer. Narrative is another layer of the OS. But then you're getting into things like what's in those things. What's the point of those layers, right? And what do they contain?
Yeah.
So from this picture, we're talking about a very specific stack, the neurochemical operating system. About the concepts of ontology and mythology and where they arise within that framework specifically, but also what ties ontology and mythology to dream and moment, which is also found in this chart, how they're linked up, how narrative is the common ground for both of those things. Mythology consists of narratives. Narratives are what is being fed to the neurochemical operating system, and altogether that constitutes what we call dream. And the dream takes place in the cosmos through space and time. This is what this chart is basically saying. You got space, you got time, you got moments, you got dreams, you got narratives, you got your operating system layers. It's all in there. Like
Well,
literally everything, every
It's really,
bit of it is there.
it's really for our reference.
But it's important. It's an important reference to know what the heck we're talking about.
Trying to get this like to fit or whatever, but so I'm kind of distracted through all what you just said there.
All I said is that it has the neurochemical operating system layers in it. It has
What does?
connection-
Okay, let's start from the start.
the chart. Abstract face space.
Okay. Yep.
Um,
Spectacle. Well, that
spectacle. Those are neurochemical
that's-
operating system layers. So that's what's encompassed in them.
right.
Then you have connections back to your narrative itself. Right? You get connection to space,
Right,
to
right,
time.
right. Okay, so this big chart is what we call the dream, and the dream is like, let's say, conglomeration of what you experience and how your mind is putting it all together through like cycles that just keep looping.
Yeah, like the so if you have a movie on film plus a soundtrack, it's when you run that movie through a projector and the soundtrack through a I guess, a sound system.
Yeah,
It's the
so
running picture on the
You're
screen.
talking about the idea of metaphor of having different components coming together to do something
Right.
all at once. Yeah.
So far we've been talking about the components.
So the
now
running
we're talking
movie,
about them
the
running.
movie on the screen that you're watching and experiencing, that's like the dream, and there's components that cause that to happen: electricity and light, and motors and all kinds of stuff. So that's kind of like a metaphor for these are the mechanics of what you experience right now when you listen to us talking or look around or blink.
And that's the stacking, that's the all of that jazz. Now, the movie itself is being what you hear, what it makes you do, all of that. The plot, if you will. Right? Which plot of the myth is being undertaken? Because if you remember, myth is a constituent of many, many different narratives. Anything to do with meaning, basically. So, whatever your current narrative is, must be some kind of reflection of the mythology. I guess that would be the better explanation for the connection between narratives in myth and narratives as the constituent of the operating system itself. What we're saying, basically, what I'm saying.
Sorry, I keep getting distracted.
Stop it. What I'm saying basically
Focus.
is that we've discussed ontology and myth and the relationship between the two. Here, we're coming at it from the neurochemical operating system, so that's basically your brain putting a picture together into a story. So the connection to myth is that those stories will be reflections of the whatever mythology is at play, because the mythology is what gives those stories any meaning. That's how it means this. That's how it means that. So mythology is more like
Otherwise, you wouldn't tell those stories.
Right. It's the connective tissue of why narratives. Like why this narrative does that versus why this one does something else. Why calling something good in this context means good, and why calling something good in that context, the same thing, is bad.
Sure.
Any like it's a shitty example, I know that much, but it's basic enough to understand. That's the main connection between this chart and the mythology chart. But the point of this is to demonstrate how those meaningful mythologies become narratives, and those narratives drive a dream, and that dream is another component of another mechanism, and then we can start going into psychosis and neurosis versus immersion
Right.
and presence.
Yeah, which is awesome. I think that's a natural way to go. Something kind of occurred to me, like we often just kind of sense and go with the flow of what we feel needs to be discussed or expounded upon or whatever, like, because it's a whole navigation, all that. But so what my kind of thought right now is where's our arc with this? Like why like I'm trying to remember or put together like what's our current direction?
So
like why are we
I think
why are we interested in this? We came from programming the dashboard and all that quite recently.
Ian's essay is actually quite inspiring for me today, even though I heard about it just today, because it actually is an interesting take on mythology, ontology, neurosis, and psychosis
I completely
all at once.
I agree. It's a great topic, but how can we contextualize it in the arc of our meetings that we've been having,
Well,
and what are we trying to do? We just came out of programming, trying to like dashboard discussion about that.
Well, I think it's in the title actually.
The title is awesome,
The psychosis.
but
Of
how do
reality.
we connect this? Like, okay,
So
like,
we're
it's
almost
grand.
there.
It's grand.
So we got to neurosis and psychosis.
Even in the past, we've been over this.
So when you have a psychosis with regards to your dream, the qualification of that word, psychosis, means you take it for a reality.
Uncontrollably.
Right.
It's not your choice.
It's a
You're not aware of the
that,
choice.
Hence the word choice of psychosis. Nobody chooses to have a mental breakdown like that, a psychological
Right.
one.
So I'm just trying to like step back and frame this in how did we even get off of the like the dashboard stuff and into this? Like I'm tempted to look at our list of past like what past episodes we've just done, and like what's our goal right now? Like what are we trying to drive towards?
So this has,
or maybe it's time to
this
revisit.
This has nothing to do with the trajectory.
I think it always should, though.
I've personally gotten burnt by software rhetoric for the past couple of months for a totally different reason, and so my headspace has not been very software oriented,
right?
As of late. So this is a a break.
I get that, and that's good.
I think we'll pick it
I'm
up.
not saying that's our main thing or anything, but we should revisit goals maybe.
Yeah, once we wrap this up, we'll actually have another baseline off of which to springboard the dashboard conversation, because we'll have a bit deeper understanding of what it is we're reflecting in the dashboard, which is this stuff.
And I don't want to be
so here's our conversation, for example, right? Like flowing from scene to scene to scene to scene.
The narrative at the bottom there, under the spectacle.
That's kind of like, there's connections there. It's never like left my mind, so to speak. The idea of the software is very clear to me, at least so far.
Yeah.
I'm simply not in the headspace where I can devote thinking time to explaining software right now.
I don't want to. I don't want to do software.
I'd rather be talking about why the software is necessary.
Yeah.
And this is this conversation anyway. So this is like me from a personal.
I agree. And I also find that there always has to be a balance between. This shouldn't come as a surprise, I guess, but like a top-down, like ideological goal, and like an emergent, like what do you enjoy? What is enjoyable in the moment?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you don't want to go too far one way or the other.
Or the goal is just speak model, and
like that's a way to burn out is by being driven by a goal, right?
Yeah.
And it sucks.
And I tend to burn out faster than a lot of people.
Yeah, so that's one reason we call these casual dev meetings, and whose primary purpose is our own enjoyment, as you can see.
It's on the back burner, but it's not forgotten in any capacity. All the plans are still the same.
The reason I said that was not out of a psychotic desire for schedule and do and plan, but that the question itself can bring up interesting things. Like what is our potential directions? What can we look at?
I look at it as being immersed in the dream and simply being curious enough to ask the question as to like what's up with that part? Where is it sitting at the moment in the collective dream? And it's fair because I mean, in some sense, y'all are waiting on me. In some sense, I'm all waiting on all y'alls. All y'alls.
Wow, dude. We didn't.
Anyway, let's keep going, man. Let's keep going.
Yeah, no, I'm just looking back, like at our list of live meetings. Anyways, we had our recent stuff. A lot of it, so much as TBD. Can you believe that? Did I just not update it, or no? We did actually do that a lot. There's like 10, 15, 20 untitled. So that's where we've been. Nobody knows what we were up to. And then before that, yes, this was really interesting. The APS language stack, that discussion. Yeah. And that's right into this stuff we're doing here. Like,
so yeah, if you were to go back to this,
and that's what led into the programming stuff. All that TBD, that was programming.
Yeah, go back to the diagram.
Okay, we'll hit the screen again. This one.
Yeah, so that language is supposed to be everything that's in that tiny circle with the squares in it.
APS language stack.
Yeah.
Yes.
and use it in whatever that language is writing. When that program runs, that's what you get in your narrative. It's bubble.
What?
So, so if you program something over here, if you execute that program, this is that.
Yeah. You can see two major bubbles, sort of. One on the left encompassing the two bubbles, and then one on the right, just the APS.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and like an abstraction. What the heck is that heart thing doing? Oh, there's Eon. He must have clicked it. Welcome, Eon. Thanks for the trip.
So we have a technical connection to our other modeling of the neurochemical operating system. And now we're not going to delve into any of that, because what we're mostly are interested in is how this particular cycle of the dream that we're discussing here can go in one of two directions. And I think I left the word accelerationism to be actually utilized here, because I think that is the most appropriate space for accelerationism to be used as a concept. Like, you have your ontology, you have your mythology, you have your dream, go, right? Speed it up, run it to its next conclusion. Like, that's the study of it, effectively. We're not talking about real events, we're not talking about abstract events, we're not talking about the encompassing concept.
To study the APS?
Yeah, like, if the APS is that, what happens? If the APS is that, what happens?
You have to have a concept of what it is first, and this will ground you in the loop. Like, weird things could happen if you try to do this.
And that programming language is supposed to be a kind of a parallel for our model to make sure to navigate that landscape, both in programmatic terms and in real terms.
Yeah, a simulation.
Which is why we have things like subjects, objects, aspects, all that jazz. And the way that all flows together. If you notice, what it's doing, it's stacking. It's a language for stacking things and making the actual ontology of the stack somewhat nebulous.
This is topological, isn't it?
Yes, this is a bird's eye view of this.
Right, of like a mountain range idea.
Yeah.
Where you're all ultimately sharing the
subjective.
same medium, if you will, of the rock ground of which the land is all part of, or the tectonic plate.
In fact, the language idea developed and evolved from this diagram. Like the abstract space language. Is that what we call it? Doesn't matter. The point is that that language is an analogy of this. It's like it's taking this terminology. If you look at it, aspect, type, subject, right? These are all keywords in the language that I was talking about in that particular session.
Yeah, we talked about this a lot in the past too, and I like that, like, space. It's kind of maybe intuitive a bit.
So like it's a concentric subjective situations.
Like, we are, like, you could use this to say that we are on like a piece of property, but we're also in a building, and we're also sitting on a couch. Those are three, like, concentric contexts.
In a room.
Each one. Yeah, right. So this is how it's a simulation language for trying to mirror isomorphically what the mind is doing. And again, that's what we were talking about earlier. We have to get back to what is processing this mythology and what is processing the ontology together. There's something that's in a mythological way doing that, like, from this significant point of view.
And that execution yields that dream I'm talking about. What's in that simulation? That So, and one way to say it is like these are the bits and pieces of what makes up a simulation.
Yeah,
And this is
yeah,
like
yeah.
what's in that simulation.
You're pointing at not something not being the thing in of itself. A piece of mapping, a map artifact isn't the thing itself. It's pointing to something.
In that context, our model becomes the the bits and pieces of the simulation and the simulation itself, right? But that's what we're trying to do with this model, but putting the bits and pieces of the simulation into
Yeah.
into the
Ultimately,
simulating
we don't
mind.
want this to be a dead, linear process.
Well, in some sense, yeah, it's like that meditative thing that the Buddhists have going for them.
Well, that anybody executing a good model has going for them, that themselves executing the model is part of that model, and it all just kind of sweeps up into an ongoing thing.
I think we understand each other,
not
but
the dead paper itself, not the words that you read, but
Yeah.
so the model is meant to be intrinsic to that.
yeah, like if you put this picture right back into your narrative and you see your narratives through this picture, you have your model in itself, ideally.
Right, and then you always hit that kind of strange loop, weird, like, what do you call it, paradox, in trying to, like, tightly couple the artifact and the meme or whatever, like both sides. You can only couple them so far, but you never can. There's a
That's a mathematical limit of representation.
right.
Back to Gödel's theorems, if the system is formal, if it follows logic, much like our thoughts tend to, mythology is what places the logic boundaries around our thoughts. Like that's why it's an important subject. But regardless of how sophisticated said mythology is, eventually it runs into one of two problems, either being incomplete or incorrect or contradictory to itself, based on the rules it set out for itself.
Right. Incompleteness. Yep.
So this is an obvious reliance on formal systems as a fundamental element of our stacking ideology and all of that stuff.
I like one thing that, in particular, that we were bringing up about myth being something that's experienced as reality. Often, so this is an appropriation of the term. In other words, we're appropriating it because when most people think of myth, they think fairy tale, or it means untrue. The definition of myth is something that's untrue, basically.
Well,
but what we're saying is no, myth is actually the opposite of that, what you believe.
So we use the word dream, but this is where we can connect that. It's that dream.
Right.
Why we call it?
And we're saying there's two ways to believe it.
First of all, why it's a dream, because it's a simulation in the mind. We're referring to the simulation, even if you're awake, even if you're asleep.
Right.
Your mind
And
is
for
simulating
anything. Anybody
something.
right now, they simulate their body and
So yeah,
what
we're
they're
not
doing.
talking about like a physical thing. We're talking about like that.
Right.
Element.
We're getting back to the wet piece of meat hanging out in a dark, damp skull.
Because of that way that works, because of that simulation element to it, even if you're sensing this couch with your eyes, right, and you can sense this couch and you're here and all of that stuff, it's still re-simulated in your mind to make sense out of, to make the next movement, to interact the next way. There's some kind of mirrored component sitting in my head, sitting in your head, and,
Right.
and all of that stuff that sort of
Allows us to do it on the fly through this kind of waves of summarization.
so the point
Up through layers of symbol.
So the point being isn't that there isn't a reality that's relevant to the dream. Like it's not. It's to not make the mistake to take one for the other. Yes, a reality is out there.
You have to know that it's happening for it to be a choice, though.
But there's a dream in between you and it, so to speak. This is kind of flowery, but that's the idea behind the statements that are being made. So the psychosis is to not make that disconnection, for better or for worse. We're not talking about like being like an idiot because of it or
And
something.
this
to that
can be
effect.
just
We're just saying not making that
something
distinction.
anybody could do at any time in the moment is make this mistake, even if they're aware of alternatives.
Well, you don't have time to like really negotiate all of those things, because again, if you don't mistake reality for reality, or sorry, if you don't take some parts of your dream for being real, you might get
Turned into a blob.
food. Usually it would be food.
Become food. Yeah.
It's understandable,
Yeah.
is what I'm
And
saying.
I think we've had so many discussions in the past about this.
So the,
Like, I
yeah,
don't think we
so
need
the,
to get
so
into
the
that.
issue isn't saying thinking that reality is real is bad. What we're trying to point out is that you only get reality through a dream. So the psychosis is to take that dream for reality without any separation. And the neurosis is to refuse to separate the two.
It's if you're not aware how it's being constructed, or you don't bring that up.
Fighting tooth and nail to have them unseparated.
Yeah.
Even with becoming aware that you could separate them, instead of saying no, you're a charlatan, you're selling you on something that is impossible. Like that resistance, that clinging to the dream as reality, or morality from the soul. I'm objective.
Yep.
I'm an objective thing.
And we call it psychosis, and you see people behaving in this way, especially in politics. When you have anybody take from a side, take any character of an extreme left
Any
or extreme
argument even.
extreme
Fuck
right,
politics.
and just look at the video of them, and you see that they're like,
You see it
so-
every time you have people arguing. Because why the fuck are we arguing?
right. Yeah, you see it everywhere.
Politics is just another manifestation. Shitty one.
Right.
Because it's big.
So with that, we shall be right back. unmute. There's some kind of I want to say like immunity mechanism which can be developed to kind of guard against the psychosis,
Or vice versa.
and it's like or to do you mean promote it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's like it's like a routine or a process of stepping back periodically to somehow out of the reification, stepping outside of it.
Yeah,
it's shifting the cognitive
from
alignment
reality to dream
window.
Instead of taking what you're perceiving to be real, see it for the dream that it is before any of it is reified
Right.
as reality.
Yeah, so like
And by reality, I also mean morality. There are two sides to that, and I just neglect one.
like naturally, and it's a good thing, our minds kind of automatically summarize and present things for us without us having to think about it. It's just like what emerges. It's like the default kind of.
Well, yeah, you don't want to be standing there drooling just because you standing in a field of grass.
Yeah, it'll happen so fast, and everything is summarized for us, right? And that's normal and natural.
For anybody who doesn't know what the reference is that your mind is being tripped up by every individual blade of grass to the point of where you stop functioning until because you're missing the fact that it's a whole field. Something to that.
And that's an impossible way to
Survive.
simulate.
It's an impossible way to survive. Nothing could survive to simulate that.
Our brain doesn't have the power to simulate this. Maybe this is what kind of tripped me up, like I think a couple weeks ago. Not tripped up, but I was just musing about if you have this this animistic model view and this stacking of layers view. Imagine trying to simulate every layer out there.
Yeah,
out in the
you'd
world.
burn out.
There's like
You'd be a smokestack.
it's insane even just to think about trying.
So chunking is a very natural process, and that's what we're trying to say. The reason I'm saying you won't survive that is because, for example, teeth and claws. If you're stuck there trying to figure out how many teeth the damn tiger has, whatever the fuck's hunting you, you're not gonna finish the counting. Or if you're right, you're not going to do much with the answer.
Yeah, so I just pulled up this chart here of that cognitive alignment window, just showing two different shifting positions.
So, in this chart, even though it's more about the intrinsic mechanics of the operating system itself, what it is showing us is a horizon, and the horizon is between narrative and object is the one that's important here, because that's the same delineation that we have for myth and ontology. Like there's a horizon there, but yet the two are interspersed in a triad.
So we have a jump of layers. Well, I guess
One that doesn't even mention type, for example. It's beta constituents of the object itself. So we're only interested in the peaks and the resonance that flows across peaks. The resonance is above the horizon, the peaks are below. So in order for there to be anything of the peaks in the narrative, it has to have representations mythologically, or a narrative about them, in other words, that give it meaning.
yeah, I feel like we could probably meditate on this for like. It would be easy to get sucked into this and like reviewing. Cause we haven't really come back to this chart too often.
Also, it's useful to see those two cognitive windows as the big chart. If you blow up the narrative, object, and type into the big chart and
by
see it from that
two
perspective as
cognitive
well.
windows, we mean the squares here that are overlapping.
Yeah, the thing that's pointing to a cognitive alignment window.
Yeah. One thing that I think should be always remembered about this chart is that at the bottom, a way I kind of see it is that at the bottom of each square.
Mediation.
Yeah,
I just noticed that.
mediation. It's old.
It's
I think I
mediation.
must have noticed that a long time ago.
For anybody else, that's mediation.
At the bottom of each square is a term, and I always kind of thought to myself of this as when you're in one or the other window, like when your cognition is shifted either one way or another, the term at the very bottom of that square is like your base reality, sort of.
Yes.
It's like the bottom concrete layer
It's
below
what's-
which there is nothing else.
It supplies the constituents of the ontology that make it up to the narrative.
Right.
You would see that relationship in the other diagram that has all those weird layer pointers on both sides. So like it has mirrors and parallels. You would see that relationship here. Meme and object will have a parallel.
Sorry, which other chart or what?
There's
What has
another
parallel?
chart that labels all of the different operating system layers, and it has like one side is mirrors, lines
okay.
that you know what I'm talking about, right?
Not this one, but
Yeah, it would
related.
it would have like lines going from cosmic to shared, from spectacular to mimetic, and those would be like mirrors, and then there would be parallels. So like spectacular. Spectacular to diplomatic will make a jump. So it's like there's reflections in different layers beyond
I think
horizons.
abstract to diplomatic, spectacular to cosmic. Yeah, but there's two ways of jumping. Anyways, that's a long time ago. A trip I don't think we need to get into.
No, but my point there was like you're saying how the bottom layer is incorporated. So in this case, meme will have a reflection and object. There was a whole thing about how that worked. And then if you switch the cognitive alignment window, it becomes type has a link to narrative.
I don't think I ever thought about that particular way of looking at that.
It's an old idea. It's very old. It's years old now. And I don't think we've touched on it in a long time. Maybe if you go through the images again for 2 seconds, I'll point out the diagram.
Yeah, I'll find it. I'll find it in a bit. I think I don't want to dive deeper into this because it's already seems like.
Yeah, the point there is like I am acknowledging what you're saying.
Yeah.
And even though this cognitive window kind of explanation skips over the last bit of the terminology in the OS, it's not by accident. There is a way to get back into it. That's what I'm really saying, is that even though it's skipped, the bottom terms are skipped, they make it back into the top two anyway. Either through reflection or through a mirror. Through a mirror or through a parallel connection.
Right. Mm-hmm.
All it's basically saying is that you'll see parallels between memes and objects, between types and narratives, between...
Now,
there's going to be connections there.
I feel like this chart kind of represents something that, like, let's say classical education, like that one would want to be prepared to do, is like maybe your teacher would want you to know how to, like the difference between psychosis and immersion, right? Taking that reality for reality, or learning how to step back and question things. Like this is kind of a
dream,
classic idea of like education, right?
No, the classic education, which...
I know, education is the wrong word. It's a classic idea of...
spirituality education, or we're talking about mechanical, industrial sort of approaches.
Well,
Because
okay, I didn't want to bring industry into this, or even the plateaus of commodification.
Because if we were to
I
focus
wanted
on
to
this-
point to prehistory.
I took education to mean civilized education.
Yeah,
like what we
I
do-
knew that
what we have now.
That's what I'm saying. I didn't want it to mean that way. However, there are reflections in civilized
So education, capital E.
which people listening would understand.
Listen, there's the difference. Here's
Capital
the
E.
Here's the difference.
That means it's our term.
Education, little e, no quotes, education, capital E. That's the difference in the
Yep.
charlatanism versus model speak.
Right. So I was just trying to
I've been
say
trying
that
to bring that standard out for
this
quite
chart
some time.
has a reflection of that, I think.
It has both.
In that this is a way to look at that tool that we have the choice to inspect the world around us, to question, to have a question about it, not to have a certainty, but to always have some kind of question, right?
So here's how I would summarize what you're saying. If you're looking at this chart as is, education with quotes and little case e is the top window.
But we don't want to vilify the top window
It's
because
not
that's the
vilified.
natural way.
The cognitive
But
misalignment is not vilified.
In a
It's
way,
in and itself.
you could use this chart to point at that. The lowercase e education would be, you must be stuck in the top square. You dare not go to the bottom square.
to the meme.
Right. That's the modern education, and we'll say capital E education is that it's perfectly normal to be in the top square, but you must have to have the health of the top square. There must be
And on top of that, you need awareness of the shift on the window, what that entails, the other underlying layers that make up the top.
This is upload. So the top gives you your download all the time, and the bottom allows you to upload back into the model to see, okay, let's tweak this, let's do that.
The source of creativity, if you will, or if I dare call it, art.
Sure, yeah.
You've noticed I've been picking on that word for some time.
We've had capital A. We've appropriated
short segue, I
art
promise.
a long time ago.
Well, yes, but I never made it clear what the fuck I'm talking about. This would be it. This is what I'm referring to as a capital A art. The dipping back down into the mimetic structure and being recreative with the mythology.
Upload. Yeah.
Exactly. This is why this is an art.
Because
It's from you. That's your you dancing with reality.
In order to install, you must have an install file. You got to have your floppy disk with your installer file on it. Shunk, you put it in. You twist the knob, it gets there. Now your disk is loading.
Memories. 5.5 inch floppies. You remember those?
Quarter.
2.25. I'm sorry. 3.5. 5.25. My bad.
Something like I forget.
I remember.
Maybe it is 5.5. I don't know.
There was a family member I had, like a distant cousin in Israel, that we used to like visit once in a while when we just moved there, and he'd have one of the very first computers I've ever interacted with in my life, and that thing had 0 hard drive, like no hard drive. Everything on that computer came from those floppies. So you turn on the computer, all it would tell you is insert whatever floppy you're trying to load. And then and it would have that picture, that granulated picture of like
our first one would have been like, like 91 or 92 or something, and I think it had a hard drive of like
a meg.
No,
Back in those days, a meg was a lot.
It was a 5.25 inch or whatever it is. I thought it had like 50 or 100 meg. Maybe that was a later one.
No.
The P100, Pentium 100.
Yeah. That would be that range.
Like
that would definitely be that
100
range.
meg hard drive. But then you had
I know
your
because that was my
disks.
first computer, the Pentium 100. That was my first computer, and 100 megs was like the biz knees.
Shit. Damn.
I promptly put a virus on it.
Oh yeah, I put all kinds of
Igor was so
viruses
happy.
and shit.
Igor was so happy with me. It's his first computer too in his entire life, and I fucking fucked it up. Like,
yeah, I remember I downloaded a virus creator too, like you customize a virus, make viruses for people or whatever, and then hide it on a disk. Oh, here's the latest. Here's Duke Nukem 3D or whatever.
That was actually my first relationship with computers, the Pentium 100. My mom showed me some macro programming for Excel.
Or no,
at
it
the
would have been
time.
Wolfenstein on floppy disk.
And Excel used Visual Basic for its, as its macro language, and so she like gave me this book on programming, learning to program, and showed what it's all about, and thus
Nice.
my career started, which is in the toilet right now, but whatever.
Temporary things happen all the time.
Got approved for EI, so there's that.
You have to keep like proving you're looking for stuff, and
Yeah, that's the easier part.
I'm pretty good.
Being
You good?
being approved for it initially is a hurdle, because if you
Is that
If
your
you-
initial? Like you haven't got any help from anything yet?
this is my first round with EI this time around. I've dealt with it before.
Yeah.
I'm lucky in that there was no cause to me being let go.
Even that, no cause. Yeah.
Just an excuse.
Right.
I am trying to not be angry.
It's not like any documented event or something happened.
yeah,
Which you can say, okay, well,
yeah. I had a documented
he
event
attacked another
earlier.
employee and bit
No,
her,
no,
bit
no,
her
nothing like
ear.
There were there were performance issues. Some of it justifiable. Some of it was
But still, that no, you can't.
uncontrolled.
Like that, if that goes to court and all that, like they know they got
No,
they got nothing
it's,
for that.
It's besides that. It's already past that point. Nobody's contesting it. Anyway, that's.
I'm pretty sure like employee protection is pretty high for just for stability of society. Like it's a thing Canada kind of likes, I guess, or whatever.
Oh no, them damn liberals.
Stabilities. Yeah. No, I don't know. It's you can't say this is again left and right and all that. And
No, I'm not. It was a jab.
hmm No, you'd say like, oh damn socialists, right? Because in Canada we have social safety nets, right? Of some capacities.
Whatever. To be honest with you, I've always found politics to be like one of the more boring topics, because they're so like into their own little boxes.
Well,
that
this
it's
is the
that-
reification
That it's
thing.
that it's like it's basically like it's a non-conversation of this.
Psychosis, anybody?
Well, oh, wow.
Gee, is this relevant?
Yeah, and that's kind of like where we can segue.
I got a kink in my neck.
Those suck. Especially if you don't know if you're trying to like remove it, but it hurts more to do it than to like not do it.
Maybe I'll just
But then you know the relief
press
that will
what
come
feels
from
good.
it will be either you break your neck entirely, or it's just going to be the best crack ever.
Just off yourself. No, I don't.
Either way,
I
you don't
tend to.
care.
No, I wouldn't mess with that. Like for self-propelled, if your neck is doing itself in a way, I feel like the body has. Anybody who's killed themselves with their own neck muscles has probably populated the gene pool less over time.
Over
On
time.
average. That's
On
all,
average.
That's all I gotta say about that.
You're
I'm
forgetting.
not gonna sit here and like
You're
like
forgetting
use my
about
elbow
you're-
or something
You're
to
forgetting about convergent evolution here,
take
bud.
my head off. Although it's possible. See, wait, no, I can't. Anyway,
Dream. We kind of left off at Dream, but Dream, moment to moment. That's the next element, right? That's the.
so dream. We were bringing up the big chart. This and topology. That was kind of one main theme we wanted to keep bringing up, was that you can look at it like mountains and layers and things
Yeah,
coming up,
of
but
which-
ultimately they're all sharing the same base layers, kind of thing. Like that's the view to pick up.
So
But there's media, and that's how you resonate between them, because it's the mountain shakes, and it's like when one shakes, the whole ground shakes a bit.
So if,
right?
can you bring the chart up?
This
so
one.
yeah. So you see the circle. The circle labeled space, right? And I'm trying to speak to what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
What we need to imagine is inside the narrative medium, right? We have multiple of these space mountains, and this is a top-down view, and they could have 3
Right.
circles, 4
Because a
circles, 2
narrative-
circles, 1 circle,
Think of any narrative.
1,500 circles.
Any narrative has at least probably parts of yourself and like a car or a road. Any story you tell, there are different objects, and these are could be seen like peaks.
So my point is to picture the whole narrative bubble, like the whole circle, as this mountain range being looked at from top down,
Right.
and those circles can disappear and reappear in and out.
And
Like, so the hills will shift up and down.
Yeah. So the metaphor is like a topographical map,
Yeah,
where
it's
you see
appearing
the
right
rings.
there.
You see rings where the elevation comes up, and then there's
Yeah.
also larger rings where it goes down. But ultimately, everything connects together in a smooth surface, right? And that's the
The same
media.
ground, made of the same ground.
This is the media, the shared media, right?
Medium,
Medium.
the medium, the bottom out of any mountain system, if you will. So you could have, in this analogy, you can have a localized
Both ways
area.
of saying could be correct.
You can have a localized area that is sharing a medium, but if you were to say zoom out, you'll notice that that is actually just a peak on another mountain range that's far larger than itself. That's the scale invariance portion as well. So being bottoming out at a medium is merely a concept. We're not talking about the medium.
Yeah, sure.
We don't know what that is. We're talking about in the
Bottoming out wasn't the right word. It's,
we assume a kind of
shared.
an infinite regression downwards and upwards in
Right.
some sense, and we're only interested in the layers that we're interested in.
Yeah. So say there was only 2 peaks, came into one. Well, that's one of now 2 other peaks that came into one. Whatever. It doesn't matter what the structure
If we're not
is.
focused on the other range, then it makes no sense to call the medium
Right.
and go further.
So it's a simulation language to be able to talk about the world around us in an isomorphic way. Therefore, we can start programming the world around us in better ways.
Just made me realize something, and I didn't think to connect those 2 ideas, but myth is also language. So we're not talking about the dictionary meaning of words in a language, but we're talking about how words are used in said language.
Right. I think
So-
this connection's been made a lot in philosophy, that words are a reality, form language is reality.
Oh, yeah,
It's
yeah,
all
for
blah,
sure.
blah.
There's the whole thing, the biblical thing is like saying I am is so significant. Right?
Right.
Because it's been stated, therefore it's true,
Like,
or some kind of a...
Sort of like you could never say anything at all if you never had myth running actively.
And interestingly enough, this this idea of how words being the shapers of reality and whatnot is also touching on the psychosis.
An expression of your shape of reality,
element. It's touching on the
which
psychosis.
could be
element.
rigid in case of psychosis,
Exactly. Not
and
recognizing
flexible
that
in
there's a dream
case
in
of
between.
of what we call immersion, the proper way, quote unquote, to
Now we've been talking about this dream in between,
navigate myth,
right?
navigate reality.
So we've talked about this dream in between. We've also described what it is in terms of ontology and mythology. So the next step here is to basically say, okay, how is dream recognized? Like, what is the in other words, things like mythology and ontology and whatever are conceptual. They are part of another myth. They're only narratives about stuff. Then there's the experiential bit that we keep driving at, that these myths are supposed to be about. So we come to the layer of the dream. We now need to, that is the part where we can start piercing apart the ongoing perceptual framework and start to peek at the connection between perception and the ontological, ideological, narratological aspects of perceiving something and feeding it back into the dream. perceiving
So
it and feeding it back
by
into the
perceiving,
dream.
you seem to be coming at like the idea of senses,
Coming
of,
into yeah.
signals coming in.
Into contact.
In other words,
or together,
kind
if
of,
you will.
I'm relating to the feeling of quote unquote going into your body as a meditation to feel your senses, which is a
Buddhist
very
parlance-
different sort of feeling than a neurotic sort of.
So Buddhist parlance has this word
Thought
coined
rapture.
as contact, sorry.
Contact.
So it talks about the sense making contact with the sense object. The moment in which the two come together is the moment in which time shifts, so to speak. That connection, that movement is the
And the
shift of the
contact
system.
is perceived as a cessation of certain ideas and a sensing of incoming conditions. Like what caused you to look at that sense?
Strict-
Now the sense is primary.
The strict
Maybe,
definition of contact in Buddhism is when you have the aforementioned contact between the sense itself, so sight, smell, or whatever. Not your smell, just the idea of sight, the idea of sense, smell, the idea of taste, coming into contact with something that is seeable, hearable, tasteable. That moment. So, on the one hand, you have the sense existing to an extent without being interrupted by anything.
Yeah, you're pointing at the continuity of it, I think.
And so what that does is this. So you have like this, in the Buddhist theory at least, you have like this unmoving consciousness that moves through at least the physical reality from moment to moment to moment to moment, but it's not like, it doesn't have any sense of time or space or whatever. It's not, nothing happens to it unless something vibrates it through contact. That vibration causes it to the next motion, and so all of the perceptions of time is condensed into this sort of moment to moment to moment to moment to moment.
No matter what, it keeps our experience keeps getting filtered into this sort of higher mind sort of idea, abstraction that's over top, because that's how memories get formed, through those kind of connections, through discrete connections through time.
So to make sure that this isn't just like completely arbitrary, there's the idea of the sixth sense, which is beyond like your natural body. That's your mind reflecting back in on itself. So you're not only fed vibrations from contact from physical objects, you're fed vibrations from thoughts and memories also of physical objects. So the sixth sense kind of has shortcuts to the other five as well by bringing them back up through memories. So there's like this kind of ongoing interplay. So that space that I'm talking about where it's not interrupted, we're not talking about minutes or seconds or anything like that, especially if you're awake.
And
we're talking about the milliseconds,
point,
microseconds.
It's commonly known or thought about that babies don't really remember much until a couple years. Like,
because meaning is
when anybody thinks back to their childhood, and as a baby, do you remember being a baby?
Yeah.
There's no, like, the remembering is a function of the mind. This accumulation you're talking about in the sixth sense, it's an accumulation. There's nothing there at that time. And what are you supposed to remember?
Relevance back to our current conversation, though, is that this accumulation is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about mythology. So that baby you're referring to, there is no mythology to give meaning to the events that the body is sensing. And so there's no there's no narrative that is forming before is part
shows
of it. But when there's meaning behind the story, there is an actual connection to what actually happened to me. How do I describe it? Now I can show you it as a memory. So
fundamentally, we use and view the term myth.
Yeah.
By pointing back to the process of a newborn child beginning to experience and create
their own unique
sixth sense,
mythology,
if you will, right?
Which are memories,
noticing
and stories.
patterns, and patterns just come in, and the patterns connect with pain and pleasure.
Also, check this out. They have no words for the experiences that they are feeling until a certain point in time, right? Like, I've watched this happen. There's a difference between being able to like getting hurt and say I'm hurt versus getting hurt and explain I just scraped my knee. Because like I have young children, as you know, and oftentimes, especially, it's not so much now because they're getting older. But
As an
oftentimes,
example, I'm hurt or I scraped my knee.
Yeah,
What are the two? What's the
don't-
difference
they don't
between
even
the two?
say-
Which one happened first?
they don't even say
You
I'm
gave
hurt.
this as an example.
I'm trying to finish it.
Okay.
So what used to happen is that all you'd hear is ah. It's up to me to piece together what the fuck had just happened, how it happened, what's the story here. The difference now is that I'm like, I heard it, this, and this, and this, and then my knee hurts.
The whole story.
So what I'm trying to point at is that there is a stage where you don't have words to connect your experiences to, therefore you don't have a mythology to actually extrapolate and give meaning to what you experienced. Except for maybe I got hurt.
Mozilla Xerox. Somebody joined and said some random shit.
Okay.
For Mozilla Firefox. Okay. Ah, your Technic is pointing out the browser that I'm using, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. You know, you could use a freer browser
Good
than
eye.
Mozilla.
Good eye, Technic, I guess.
You can use
welcome.
DuckDuckGo.
Glad you're here. Let's see. We haven't checked.
Did you know that I'm a rabid Chrome user? And you should hate me.
Discriminating. Oh, there was a couple of people. Look at that. We had 3 people at one time. Can you believe it? And there's still 2 out there who must wait for a short break, from which we shall be right back. Same page.
So let's get closer to psychosis of reality, and by extension, morality. Now, we're making a distinction between reality and morality because we have another set of layers dealing with objectivism and solipsism.
Yeah, we were probably going to get into that next time.
Yeah, but suffice it to say that one is dealing more with like the all five extrinsic senses versus the one that deals almost to the exclusion of the five senses, the sixth sense that we were discussing.
Interesting.
And
yeah, no, that's a great distinction. I wanted to say that we've discussed this at length in previous meetings.
so
But it's great to revisit. Like, I'm sure we have new insights and all that. You never know what you could find, right?
yeah, so the basic, like very unnuanced and without categorizing
So we're back
senses.
to feedback observation.
Of course, why wouldn't we be?
That's exactly where we're back to. With what's the difference between psychosis and
the
immersion?
and the lack thereof. Yeah.
Because we want to experience reality as if it's real, because that's the only way that I can say words and speak them. If I didn't think that they meant something or weren't real, I wouldn't say it. If these ideas or whatever I talk about didn't have some basis, I wouldn't even be able to express it, because I wouldn't believe in it.
If that's what you're qualifying as valuable, sure. Notice how I made a jump between quantitative and qualitative very, very slyly.
Valuable?
Qualify as valuable. So the jump between quantum and
yeah, I didn't want to hold on.
Quantitative and qualitative is really arbitrary.
I think maybe I follow, but I just...
It was a jab. It was no more than a jab. It wasn't supposed to be a big discussion. If you qualify that as valuable, that's what you're going to strive for. Your methodology is going to rearrange itself as
basic statement.
Yeah,
yes,
that's it.
But also then I figure that gets into the, I don't know, neurosis. I don't know.
Well, neurosis and psychosis are interrelated. You don't have you don't have one without the other.
So
one is with reference to the dream, which is just where we're coming off of. Hence, that's what we're talking about.
I just wanted to juxtapose psychosis and immersion as two ways of, let's say, experiencing reality, which we all do. We don't have a choice. It is happening, you could say, right? Psychosis versus immersion, same thing. Basically,
So-
they can appear they can have the exact appearance.
So take the reality. I'll paint the simple picture. Take reality, morality as a spectrum. Dream sitting like a lens in front of it. You are the
What's real and what's moral.
yeah, and the dream presents everything as real and moral.
Okay,
in some capacity,
like yeah,
real or unreal, moral or not moral, and somewhere in the spectrum in between. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not saying it's presenting anything specifically.
right.
It's just a lens.
And when we talked about this before, there's a big emphasis on the fact that you have to have psychosis before you can have neurosis. Like, they don't exist without the other, because
Before is not the correct word. Then.
well, whatever, you know what I mean. I'm just trying to point to.
They're codependent.
I'm paraphrasing, so sure, codependent, but it's easy to imagine how can you have neurosis without psychosis. If you then try to pick apart what does it mean, psychosis, like taking a certain model as reality, like uncontrollably though, there's no brakes
you can
on the system.
separate them conceptually. You can't separate them functionally. Wherever you see an example of psychosis,
Right. Okay.
there
Okay.
is going
Okay.
to be
Okay.
neurosis.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're right. That's a
But
good thing to point.
conceptually, they're not the same thing. No. So I can break it
And
down.
conceptually, you would see one as. I'm just somehow seeing psychosis as more fundamental than neurosis. I don't know.
It's
it seems like a more basic
if you
playground
put-
upon which neurosis
so
can say
so
can
that's
can
put in the
dance.
dream. That's put in the dream before the moment. Whereas in reverse, you put the moment before the dream, but neither is really the correct idea because they have to come at the same time. They're
Right.
codependent for a reason. And that's why you don't find separation in psychosis and neurosis, and you don't find separation in the model from immersion and presence. Those are really the key elements that we're trying to dive into. So you let's take it step by step. Separate the concepts, talk about them individually, unite the concepts,
Which they
talk
often
about
are,
them,
right?
talk about them together. So we went off of talking about dream, which means we should talk about psychosis first and then bring it together to neurosis. So we were discussing that psychosis is taking the spectrum of objectivism and solipsism being the framework like of reality.
Going old school, eh?
Who dat? What do you mean? Oh yeah, for like a year now or more.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What's up, D-Gents?
Yep.
Hey.
The Wi-Fi busted.
So yeah,
Very much. Welcome, Dustman.
Sorry, I'm.
Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Yeah, so
We're talking about psychosis.
Oh, boy.
psychosis, neurosis.
Let me tell you.
all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're trying to get at is that you have this solipsistic and objectivistic spectrum that forms your reality and your morality, and then there is like this dream layer that brings together your mythology and your ontology. So when I'm talking about morality, when I'm talking about reality, part of the mythology is going to be stating what is moral, what is not, what is real, what isn't. So it's all kind of intertwined into that narrative. Essentially, is that narrative is what brings it all together. So with that, you have your spectrum, you have your dream, and then you have a psychosis, which is a refusal to see the dream separate from what's real and what's moral. So it's like taking those two layers and splashing them right back together and just calling that one thing and not dwelling in it or even trying to think about the separation of that. That's what makes it a psychosis, like the inability to separate it. Just the one big grand illusion. So now to bring it to neurosis, dream is a momentary composition, right? So you have moment by moment by moment by moment by moment by moment.
Mm-hmm.
Psychosis would refer to this other counterpart to neurosis, would correspond to the counterpart of psychosis, in which that refusal is happening. So each moment has to be it belongs to the dream, right? Like the dream shapes the moment. The psychosis makes you attached to the moment being part of the psychosis. It's like an intertwined loop.
There's something missing.
I'm trying to.
There's a piece missing that
Yeah,
corrupts the whole thing, doesn't allow it to self-regulate.
Oh, that piece is that any divergence, like any deviation from the neurotic attachment of dream to
Is punished.
reality is perceived as pain, and then expressed as punishment in the loop-back narrative. The mythological narrative feeds that back as punishment for one's sins, if you will. So, the more concrete picture that you see with this is that when somebody tries to say engage with self-reflection, it's pretty much universally accepted as lazy, don't want to work kind of a thing. You don't want to provide for others, you want to be stuck in your head sort of mentality. Extreme example, but the emotional sort of
Yeah, well,
perception of
there's a
that is-
spectrum to
it-
that,
it-
from people living in mom's basement all the way to
hippies and
like people who just get stuck in the clouds too often and get punished at work and all this kind of stuff because they're like trying to figure out what the fuck is the meaning of it all.
Think about the kinds of societies that allow for hermits to actually be part of their social structure. From our perspective, quote unquote, capitalist West, whatever, just bums that don't want to work and collect food from people for some reason. Right? Like, we don't see a difference between that and, say, like a homeless person on the street.
Reminded of Hero's Journey.
Our mythology doesn't account for any variation, for example.
No, there's
It's immediate punishment.
there's no acceptance of somebody being on a mission or journey.
For themselves, especially for themselves.
Dustman.
Relax.
So that's the lofty ideas of the day.
Fair enough.
Yep. Did you catch all that?
I think I'm done with.
There'll be a test tomorrow.
I had a
Oh, God.
I had a stretch I had to get through. Sorry.
Well, that explains why there's so many homeless people that are neurodivergent, drug addicts.
Just don't fit
You
in.
know, they're So
Well, neurodivergency
Yeah, and
is a
you're
huge factor,
kicked
for
off
sure.
to the street.
yeah,
Kicked to the street. If you can't find a way to cope.
you don't know how to function in society. A lot of people, right?
And it's a very narrow. There's a very narrow playing field of what's called functional in this case. So it makes it very easy to delineate people into different stratums of dysfunction, essentially.
For sure. Makes sense.
I didn't expect to, but cool. I love that. Thank you. Give me some confidence here, bro.
Yeah.
So yeah, so trying to touch on the whole neurotic aspect of that comes right alongside psychosis, because you don't see the two separate. You don't see a separation between the two in terms of function. They're separate conceptually, different things, but they always, where you find one, you find the other. Psychosis would be this merging of the dream with your reality-morality spectrum, because everything you perceive is either real or unreal, moral or amoral, anywhere in between, neutral.
Neurosis seems closer to affect.
Yes,
Like something feels good, feels bad, then that becomes part of your like
It's the
driving force of I
it's
don't want
running
to be
off
punished.
emotions, yeah.
I don't want to
it's
be
the sensitivity
punished.
to
I want to be
being,
rewarded.
It's the sensitivity to being punished and rewarded. It's like, if I do this, I'll be punished. If I do that, I'll be rewarded. If I do, see, that keeps you stuck on the next phase. So it's moment by moment, but those phases are entirely dictated by whatever the dream is presenting to you. You have no agency in that. You're just functioning, pretty much. In other words, you're being taken advantage of. This is the other side to it. Whether purposefully or not is irrelevant, because the system is more mechanical than it is purposeful. So we're not talking about being taken advantage of just for the sake of somebody's enrichment, but also, other people get the ability to eat because you don't, somehow. Like, there's all these systemic elements to it. It's not just personal
well,
stuff.
otherwise, how could the machine be supported?
The machine can do it only
You need
because it doesn't
support.
give a shit about any individual. It just
there's-
works in numbers.
There's certain people that it doesn't kill. That's why it keeps going.
Yeah, it's a number game, so you could just be like part of the statistic. Couldn't give a shit anymore. So we're not talking
Survival
about.
of the fittest.
So, I think this is like one of the things that I've missed a lot in my explanations of the system, is that it's not talking about like this rich asshole is trying to take advantage of you. There are rich assholes that are trying to take advantage of you, but also the inner workings of the mechanisms of the entire system kill people. Impersonally, entirely, just systemically.
Well, they,
the math
they
kills
kill
them.
themselves if they can't function within that system, right? I don't think the system itself kills them.
It's a gangster computer guy.
The system is neglectful, let's put it that way. and hostile if you cross it.
Right.
So if it's neglecting you, you're fending for yourself, and if you don't have enough, you're fucked. And if you do anything against it, it's hostile, you're fucked. So in most ways, let's put it that way, in most ways, it's not to your real benefit. It's more like a fact to deal with, more than anything else.
Yeah.
And the more you deal with it, the more you feed it. Which is, that's the real scam.
What if we put our transcripts on the wiki so that people could edit and correct it? And I was thinking too, like, if it's on a wiki, it's on Pages, then you can search it through Google. So, like, if we put transcripts online, imagine how much that would, like...
Sorry.
Oh, the AI would love it.
Just, yeah, like...
Get to learn
in
us a little
search
more.
results, like, there's so many words we've said, like, we would post 1 million words, right? And that's a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, like, what if that's where we put transcripts online, searchable?
Mr. Wannabe Popular over here.
I don't know. Well, I was just thinking, like, with the AI ability to really sift through information and find things, it's a matter of time before, like,
Only
Portal Mountain
only people
gets
that
up there,
will
right?
sit through every single meeting of ours
Which is-
deserve to be
hey,
called
Let's see.
masters.
Who are our masters today? Oh, we still got 2, I think.
I'm feeding my ego here. Come on.
2 live. Congrats.
Yeah, it's under the assumption you guys are both masters.
According to my own schema, I am definitely not.
Yeah, well,
I lack the necessary
We're all masters in our own right.
qualities. I'm only consistent. At least in some things. That's about it.
respec.
Yeah. It's good to acknowledge that.
So
What's that?
It's good to acknowledge that. Good, like, what's the saying? It's like, the smarter you are, the more you know that you don't know, kind of thing.
Good old
You
Socrates,
realize that
I
there's,
believe.
yeah, there's more that you don't know, kind of thing. You come to the realization.
Yeah.
That is just a little bit of a snippet of the full spectrum of all the things that could possibly be known.
I
Right.
think they relate this to the concept of humility.
Yeah.
That's you get hit by it.
You know what? I got
Or
the
reality.
more.
Reality?
I have a more.
Yeah.
Let's call it
One and the same.
less neurotypical take on this. Even math says it's going to be a snippet. Like, this is basically like
Incomplete.
such a key piece of knowledge of information that I found to be
There is no one complete system.
so useful. Yeah. So the idea goes like this. If you have,
This is an axiom in math, I guess, I'm assuming.
well, yeah, it's a mathematical proof. When you have a system of symbols, right, and you have rules of getting from one set of symbols to another, you can use that system to represent basically anything.
Right.
So it could be like your mathematical symbols with its addition and subtraction symbols and all of that, and that's how you can get to
X equals such and such.
that's how
Y
you get
equals-
from 1 and 2 to 3 with a plus sign in between. Like, you have rules to say that when you have that, you have this,
Right.
or back, or you can go back.
Uh-huh. So a formal system. Is what you
That's
called
what
it
that's what
before.
they're called. So when you have symbols
An
and
environment.
and rules to change those to change those symbols to other symbols, you can get your axioms, your beginning symbols, the very initial things that you could start from, the basics, and then theorems, any other thing you can construct out of that. Now, the math goes on and says if that system is complex enough, it will begin to self-contradict. Like, it will make statements that are both true and false at the same time.
Right.
And,
Goes against the math.
and moreover, it'll start to do things like refer back to itself. So the statements it's going to be making are going to now start to be about itself.
Mm.
And the truths and the falsehoods of those statements are not going to be gathered from building up from the beginning symbols to begin with. But the fact is,
Symbols.
sorry, that was a misspeak.
A Hofstadterism.
That was something. Anyway, the point being is that like those strings will be legal within the confines of the initial system, but they could not be ever arrived at through manipulating symbols over and over and over again from the basics. So you have like the situation of it talks about things that are not present in the, in it, and also it talks about itself.
And we're talking about like a way of modeling reality in its increasing complexity through layers. So like things get more complex through layers, like say all the organs in the body come together to make a body. The body is like an emergent thing above any one organ, can't explain the body, right? Same like a car. You've got engine, tires, a body. That now it's all a car, but each element can't explain it. And now the car can say, I can do a donut. You can't explain that. What the engine has no concept of donuts or anything like that. It came out of nowhere. Like, what is a donut?
It's a tool being utilized.
Well, that's the side effect of it, yes. So you have like these disconnects. They're not rational. You can't calculate them. You can't. It's like saying,
Well, by studying engines and tires and axles and gears, you'll never come to a scientific conclusion of why donuts, or like what is a donut, or like how that works.
yeah, it's going to be the car speeding already combined in its environment after the fact.
It's at a totally different level of language.
All
An
of the
emergent
different,
layer.
all of the different turns, all of the different revs, and all of the different piston firings are not
Like
going
you
to
can
explain.
Well, that's all like
yeah, like-
thermodynamics, though, isn't it?
It's saying that there's no logical leap from one layer to the next to explain what's happening. So you can't think in terms of it all has to be one part of one gigantic system, because there's disconnects in layers
Right.
that are not rational in and of themselves. They just appear to be valid within the systems below them.
It's kind of just a chain reaction if you think about it deeper.
Well, it's like saying, okay, you have this neat little system of which you can get from one X to Z to A, C, to blah, but now you have this like amalgamation that is legal in the system, but you can't arrive at it from anywhere. It's not logically, you cannot arrive to there. There's no a 1 + 2 + 3 situation that gives you X.
Right. It's more complex than that.
This
It's not
sentence
so much
is
as
false.
it's not so much as complex as that it appears in it. It's valid by its own rules, but it's not apparent through it. So, just because it's there, that is also there. So there's like a new layer forming, just as an emergent layer. That's the key. There's no logical leap. You can go from top to bottom and say how this piece is formulated out of those pieces, but you can't say how those pieces came together to formulate that. That's the logical leap that's missing. That's like the same situation you have with like, wow, life cannot be explained, because we're going from bottom up and there's no logical leaps from there. But there is a logical leap because we're already alive, so we can definitely say we're made out of this, out of that, out of this. So we know what the patterns of the molecules are to an extent. What we can't figure out is how would they come up?
How is all this created?
Created, yes. Big quotation
Wow.
mark.
Yeah.
It's not. I'm not saying it's
That's
not.
a pretty deep
I'm not
conversation.
saying it's not uncreated, but in the context of a system that cannot account for it, it may as well have been.
Right.
It's just like, oh, this thing appeared. May as
Yeah.
well have been created.
It's kind of aside from the fact, or the point, maybe.
No,
To
it's
muse
all
on that.
interrelated.
It's amazing, though, to think about history as a building complexity, right?
Yeah.
Like the Portal Mountain myth about, well, it's probably, there's other myths, but the sun beating down on an Earth, being the supermolecules. The idea is about
heat
the
dissipation?
efficiency of dissipation of heat. So more complex things can get rid of the heat faster that comes into it. So
On top of that, the energy to build such a complex thing is given to it by the very fact of the energy being beamed down onto
Right. You
this.
just get this boiling mass, sort of boiling, quote unquote.
So it
Right.
sets shit in motion, and all of a sudden it uses that energy to spontaneously form one structure.
Like say a tornado or a twister coming up and dissipating energy, right? Like that's like how storms work in that.
Yeah. It's the same idea. So if I may,
Growing, yeah.
you have your cold air on top, hot air on the bottom, and at this point it's also dispersed. There's no structure to any of the gases, right? But there's a lot of potential energy contained.
They're probably colliding with one
They're pressing
another
in
for
each
one.
other really, really hard. So there's a lot of buildup of energy. Now, a regular structure starts to form that is far more efficient than the current squashing to transposing the cold and the hot to
Right.
where they're supposed to go.
To create that tornado.
So the first twist makes it easier for the next twist to become faster, for the next twist to become faster. And so not only does like the energies, all of that potential energy is getting used to, like finally is moving to the right place, it's also getting used up to build this new structure as well in the process.
It's emergent.
And so now you have a more specific structure out of the chaos that is actually will end up causing even more chaos, because everything is going to be dissipated eventually once the tornado stops. But in that time, you have a correlation of a reduction in chaos for an eventual expansion. So there's like this mathematical notion that this happens with molecules and on. For example, if you have a chemical soup surrounded by a bath to which you can remove heat into, like in water. So if you have a bunch of different molecules essentially in water suspended, and you feed sunbeams into it for a very, 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 very long time, some of these chemicals will start to combine using that energy, because those structures are even better at removing the energy that it gets fed after the fact.
Right.
And the fastest way to expand on that is replication. The more of those molecules you have, the more efficient the dissipation of heat.
Just getting rid of it.
So not only
as
is it
best
getting
as
more
possible.
complex, it's moving towards a self-replicating situation, because
There you
that's
have life.
the
It's
faster
like
and faster and
self-multiplied
faster. and
Life is like
faster.
the best funnel for
all that
putting
energy.
the hot air up to the top where it should be and the cold down.
Right.
So in this model that we have, we're not just talking about the psychological stuff. We're actually building off of that idea as well. And we're talking that thoughts are also built up like this, for example, but in a more metaphorical sense than you can't calculate thoughts, for example.
Yeah.
That's that
It's
gap.
not quantifiable.
That's that gap between real. Yeah, there you go. That gap, that rational gap, doesn't exist between like your thinking brain and the thoughts that it thinks.
Right.
Right. All you
What's
can.
that, existentialism?
I don't think it's anything. I think it's just a real an observation, to be honest. But what we're also saying is, like, in the building up of a myth.
What is existentialism? This is
only
the,
things that exist are real.
This is the Portal Mountain origin myth, if you will, of
Right.
like life on Earth. Where did it come from? Just as a basis starter point.
How do you quantify thoughts? Right.
My point there was like you're faced with the same situation. Like, thoughts appear within the brain, but the brain cannot account for thoughts. So the point we were making earlier is how you have to include in your mythology, that is in your thoughts, the components of your brain, the components of your body, so that the two start to line up.
Yeah.
And if you're missing the bottom layers
Yeah.
from your mythology, you can get into like a lot of
We didn't
fucked
really
up.
explain this part to Dustin, but in this, so the origin story, Portal Mountain origin myth of life, you have this increasing complexity through layers and layers, and eventually we're at the point where it's like organs come together to make a body, right, of this
And each time
type, and with a neurochemical system emerging from that.
Right.
At each time, every layer that came before, in more fundamental and more simplistic, say, things, have to be taken care of. So
the
an
body has to take care
example
of its
is that
molecules.
the stomach is an organ, That's
Right.
because energy always has to keep coming in no matter what. That's a part of it. And the feeling of getting hungry into our neurology, like our experience through a sense of pain, sort of, right? Like that we're hungry.
Right.
That's very congruent with, you could say, like that's a higher layer experience of hunger. Very congruent with the fact that every single cell in the body needs food to come in, and also there's an organ to take it, right? So on these different layers of complexity, you're all saying the same message,
Right.
that food, have a banana or whatever, right?
I has to eat.
Right. So
Yeah.
that's a thing that we didn't really talk about, is that
So
each layer has to take care of the ones before it, whatever its content is. And this is like a conservatism type of thing, a traditionalism. Like this is where conservatives could relate, I think, easily to the model, is that
there's that
we do things
authoritative say.
for a reason. We have farms for a reason. You know, we cook good food for a reason. It's all part of, because it all communicates together, right? It's all
Yeah.
one process.
Your
happening.
body's running off of premium
Even-
kind of fuel,
So
right? Put it into that kind of comparison.
So put it into this way. Look, I'm hungry.
Yeah, it needs the right
that's
food.
a
The right
freaking
food is
mythology.
important.
That's an entire mythology that takes into
But don't
account
just
your,
eat
your
anything.
biological body.
Right.
The requirements that it has for itself and how to obtain those requirements. That's all so loaded within that one statement. So what we're saying is that pretty much everything you say, and actually everything you say, is part of some mythology, and that mythology is either congruent
Offspring.
with or not congruent with the body to some extent, in the way that Brian was saying. So like, I am hungry is a myth, not because it's not real. It's because it's a story. Right. It's a story your mind tells itself so that it takes action and moves upon that story. Because I am hungry means go to the fridge or go to the restaurant or whatever the fucking case
Yeah,
may be.
eat something.
There's a meaning behind it that's just beyond the actual perception of hunger itself, which is incorporated into that myth and being made meaningful to the next activity.
Right. That makes sense.
And I'm drilling all of this like that because these things are so intertwined that you can't really leave one aspect of it alone without touching on this and that and that and the other, right? So not only do we have myth, we have an ontology. An ontology is the literal walking map that you have. Okay, I'm hungry, so restaurants, so fridge, kitchen, whatever that you need to go to. That's part of your myth is now making more decisions based on the hunger. Now you're deciding which location to go to.
Right.
And your myth will supply that ontology to you. Like your memory will give you a map to know where food is. That's what is meant by all of this. They sound like profound concepts. They're really not. They're just experiential ones that nobody talks about this way, I guess. And then come our neurosis, psychosis understanding, and that's like whether those maps are like, well, in this case it's hard to say they're not reality, but in this case it's more like when you are feeling hunger, is this the only possible map to have? Is there a different organization of your perception that could fulfill the exact same thing? So it could be the same dream, but a different quote-unquote reality. Sometimes the moral decisions make it into play. Like, if I do this, I'm stealing from that person. If I do that, I am not stealing from anybody. This is just very rough, so forgive me for the simplicity of it. Right, so I'm just trying to interject
That's
kind of
the moral
morality.
stuff. That's why I like to point at the idea of like reality, psychosis as taking certain reality for real.
Morality will drive which one you'll pick for sure. Out of all the choices that you have to construct reality from, the
I
moral
guess it's
choices
good.
are going to drive the decisions themselves.
It's good that you point out that they're basically codependent,
Yes, morality and reality are like.
but
So-
it's nice to think of them as separate, like as two different things.
So when I separate the dream into its moments, I always say that moments constitute everything that is real and moral at the same time. So there are no unreal moments and there are no non-moral moments. Experience is both that of reality and that of morality at the same time. The gist is basically not to get into the psychosis of believing this is real and this is moral, but recognizing that these are dream elements that you have selection from, and understanding of what their qualities of reality are, what their qualities of morality are, and how that can feed into the next moment based on your perception rather than the dream feeding it to your meaning, the mythology feeding it back to your meaning. So it's like a way to modify the mythology as you go, so you're not nailed down to like it. So you're not stuck to like an extrinsic system of understanding anything. It's always you feeding back into your understanding. And I guess that's what the idea of freedom might come into play, I guess, conceptually. But it's not the kind of freedom that people usually talk about. You're not going to be outside of the system, even if you realize it or not. So it's all like one part of this package. It's a bittersweet sort of deal in that sense, because you're still going to be playing into the system from the perspective of you need things from it. So realizing whether something is real or moral or unreal or not moral isn't going to play a whole of a different role in how you interact with the rest of the system that doesn't give a shit about that and has it all prescribed into quantitative sort of codes with the legal system.
I don't know, man.
That lists
to
out
me, like
what's
I
good and what's bad.
I hear you, and it just
I'm
kind of like
trailing
going
off.
on and
I
on,
am
and
trailing
I
off.
don't know if Dustin is right on exact track or maybe, but like it's cool to hear concepts and things floating here and there. But I don't think anybody in this conversation, except for you, has like an idea of like what's going on.
I'm fully realizing I'm
just
kind of
gonna say
trailing
that.
off into a lot of different.
So like I'd like to recenter,
Yeah.
and maybe perhaps
Yeah.
Dustin has a question about any of that.
For sure.
And then we can slowly not start doing like an explanation again, but have a discussion about it, including maybe myself as well.
I hear you.
Spark that joint and I'll come up with all kinds of
You've
ideas.
been accepted.
All right.
Your criticism has
Ideas are
already been
coming.
accepted, man. I told you. It's
Yeah,
a
I don't
tangent.
know if you're really saying anything that's too out there. It's pretty common sense. Maybe not common sense, but I mean logical.
It's a lot of stuff that you've already encountered a lot. Just like we've talked about all kinds of stuff, like the neurology of like just thinking about cognition and how the world around you is sensed and objects come up and like a couch and that. Like that's your mythology,
how it's a
right?
conversation, for example, between
Yeah.
you and the objects
Well,
in
and
some sense.
also, thoughts that you have in your brain aren't necessarily reality. So a lot of
But they
people
but they
that
also
run
have-
off of purely emotions.
But they affect reality because their actions take on a real course, right? So
Yeah.
is that emotion not constituent of the same reality then? Because it has a real effect,
Well, it's
but it is
emotions
itself
lead to actions
unreal.
sometimes, right?
Well, that's the
what
point
is-
behind
The
saying
emotions are usually going to be on the moral, neurosis side, aren't they? Morality? What do you think?
Neurosis.
Yeah. Emotions, emotional triggering. Like Dustin mentioned, that was one of his first comments. Is like
triggering in
emotional.
and of themselves. Triggers in and of themselves are the pointer to neurosis. Psychosis is about the story. Neurosis is about the behavior. The sticking to it like a fly on shit. It's when you talk to a person and it feels like talking to a complete wall. The narrative is what they're locked on. That locking.
I like that. Yeah.
That locking is what I'm calling the neurosis. The story itself is the psychosis. The what they're locked onto. The fact of the locking is neurosis. And you don't find one without the other.
But you can break, like, personality types too, right?
Well,
Some are higher in
Sure.
neuroticism and...
It presents
you know?
itself differently, and you'll have like people are being more objective, people are being more subjective to it.
It sounds like
And we have a spectrum for that.
you're,
Yeah.
it's a connection
then-
between higher and lower kind of behaviors.
Well,
sounds
objectivism and solipsism are the key players, and that's what gives us our spectrum.
I'm gonna call a break here and take a leak skis. And so shall we be right backs.
Doesn't matter.
Alright,
we can keep
we'll
recording.
leave it
Doesn't
on.
matter.
I'm on. I'll be back.
It's a legitimate
But-
conversation, buddy.
But because of that, right, I can hypothetically play out a scenario in my mind, and my body is reacting to it like it's actually happening,
Empathy.
right?
That's the empathetic response.
So that's why I'm saying, like, that emotional intelligence, right? So
Yeah, well, I mean, I've lived on this earth for quite a while. I believe I have some of that.
I'm not saying you don't.
No.
And I'm not saying I have more than you.
It wasn't a comparison.
Right? I'm just saying.
Look, I'm saying
In general.
I actually do know what you're talking about, and yeah, there's the empathetic response.
But it's not necessarily based in reality. It's
Oh,
a
no.
perceived situation that I've built up in my mind.
I'm
Once I
very-
realize that, then I'm no longer a slave to it. Right?
Yeah, you realize it's more like it's a circumstance that is hypothetical. Reality is here. Hypothetical stuff feeds into reality, but it's not the reality.
Right.
Like it can inform it, so to speak.
Right. So if I'm thinking about maybe a previous conversation I've had, or a conversation I'm going to be having in the future, and then I play out all those scenarios, and then my body and my mind is actually going through it like it's actually happening.
Yeah.
But nothing actually happened.
And it's giving you
Right?
clues. It's giving you clues what you'll be comfortable with. It's giving you clues what you're not going to be comfortable with.
Right.
Which situations you're more prepared for than others. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Dude, it's almost relevant. It's slightly different, but I just had my G test. So, like, I've been driving for a while. So normally I'm fine, right? Like, I just drive. I don't think about it. But I'm going to this test. My,
You know what your
my
weaknesses
nervous
are.
system are fucking shot. Is
Yeah.
shot, right? Like, so I'm like,
because you've been playing it up in your mind, thinking, well, I need to worry about this, this, and this. Oh, what if this happens? What if that happens? Now you're
And
blowing
I-
it up in your mind. Your body's going through a physical reaction to it, right?
That's a whole other
in your
story.
mind, it actually happened,
yeah.
right?
I was
But you
more
can't
nervous
make
going
that
there than I
distinction.
was at the test. The test went fine, by the way.
Yeah.
I got my G.
We have a powerful simulator.
And I,
Yeah,
This
that's
is
what we
this
were
is
kinda
a we're
talking
talking
about.
about
my
a simulation language.
my simulator almost failed me right at the very fucking start. So you know, like the test area right there.
Yeah.
You go out into from the parking lot. You go out to Commerce Park. No, not Commerce Park. Yes, Commerce Park.
Yeah, I know the area.
Isn't it you come out into Bryan Drive and Commerce
So
Park is coming
there's
straight
an
at
exit
you?
right across from it.
Isn't that Commerce Park?
Doesn't matter. Just
And
go on.
me in my head, I'm like, okay, I gotta do this right. All the shoulder checks, right? Like left, right, all that jazz. Make sure they notice all of that shit, right? This car creeping up, like it's basically blending into the background, sort of color type of car. It's my fault. I'm not saying it's not my fault,
Right.
but anyway, that test could have been over.
Get
Like
into an
so,
accident?
because no, the way they were slightly off to the right, so they had the right of way,
Right.
and I was there before them, and I'm doing my checks, and they're just like going.
Right.
So I do all my checks, I start to go, and I see the motion, and I'm like,
Yeah.
and the comment I get is like, got that just in the nick of time. It would have been a very short test.
Yeah. Well, and that's part of driving. Where you need to be defensive. You you know what you're thinking, but you don't know what the other guy's
Oh,
thinking.
fuck
So you
it.
just need to be
The-
aware, right?
The other adventure is that you have to do the lane changes in the highway.
Right.
So you're just supposed to, when it's safe, go. I do my lane change right. When it's safe, go. I do my lane change left. But in front of me, as I do my left change, the traffic is slowed to a crawl behind one of those trucks that's sporting the yellow lights. So I'm like trying to negotiate slowing down,
Yeah.
looking over my shoulder, getting the fuck out of the way all at once. And I'm new at this, right? So,
course, yeah.
and this is on a test. Of course it has to be. Because every time I drove on the highway, I never had that shit happen to me. I was just like going 90 or 100 or whatever to
Right.
whatever the fuck I'm going.
So it's a real test.
I know, and I'm just like going, well, that's quite the adventure we just had here.
Almost got killed twice.
Thank you, testing day. Of course, it was raining like the entire time too.
Right, of course.
Nice. Sets the mood. It's like a Ghost Recon mission.
Well, he said I met the standard. Who am I to complain?
In all reality, you haven't been
G
driving
unit.
that long, right? G unit. Yeah, you haven't been driving that long, so it's all
And
experiential
I've
stuff,
actually
right?
tended to avoid the highway because it's extra stress for almost zero gain.
Yeah, it doesn't save that much time, and the risks are obviously higher. I mean, it would be different if you were going to Toronto all the time. You wouldn't have much of a choice.
It's about 5 to 10 minutes at most from here to where I live. I timed it because I took the highway to getting here. Like I said, I was more nervous fucking driving that route. And motherfucker, this exit, unless you know it, you're not going in the right lane.
Right.
I think I got it now though.
Yeah.
This last drive
Yeah.
set it off for me.
Well, and a lot of that is like you built up this thing in your mind, right? That
One thing that one thing that was actually pretty cool about this situation, and it happened to me. I took one lesson just before the test, just to make sure I can do it.
well, you
kind
say
of
you
a
know what's
thing.
going to be on it too.
So when I used to drive on the highway earlier, there was that shift in perception that happens when you slow down from the highway, and you feel like you're going slower than you are. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure you know what I'm talking
Oh yeah.
about.
Yeah, getting off the highway, you're
That's
going
fun.
from 100 to 80, and even that, it's like it doesn't.
I didn't feel that though.
Yeah.
Like that like I could still feel 50 like properly. So like physically, I felt it.
Right.
I don't know how to explain it a bit better.
We're not worthy.
I thought everybody goes through this switch then. What is it? Is it not true?
No, well, it's also
It's
going,
just fun.
going
Like,
up
I
a
didn't
hill.
It's
I was
just
so
fun,
No,
surprised.
but it's the same
Whatever.
feeling as going up a hill, right?
You feel
So
like
when you're going,
yeah,
you feel like
wanna-
you're going slow, so you want to step on it, so you feel like you're going
Yeah, yeah.
faster, and then
It's
you
not like
realize,
especially
fuck, I'm going.
especially after going down.
Well, down a hill is different too, but
Yeah.
because
not-
it's also you let off the gas, you're not even a foot on the gas, and your car is accelerating, which
How is your car heavy or not?
yeah, it's all-wheel drive. So.
Because that's another thing that almost threw me off. Like with the lighter cars, you press it to accelerate, you press the pedal, it fucking goes, right? My van,
Not so much.
I'm like, okay, I press it. Okay, no, I need to press more.
Right.
It's nice when the vehicle is balanced though enough that when you smash the pedal, you got some kick to like.
Well, I got the econ thing turned on, and I think that's
Does that
affecting it.
actually? Can you? So you can't. You literally can't.
It's
See, I would never do that. I would see that as
It
dangerous.
changes
Because
when
what
it
if
switches
what if you
gears.
switch a new lane or something, or some panic happens, and now you have to slam the pedal to get the fuck out of there? Oh, economy mode, ding ding ding. Meanwhile, someone fucking smashes in the back of you. Would you ever limit yourself voluntarily?
Economy
Dustin?
mode will.
If you could on your vehicle, would you limit your like amount that you can rev the engine? Like, you can't go past 3.
No, I'd
No,
probably
that's
go
not what
down.
it's doing.
Well, it's doing something like
it's
that.
not what it's doing. It's
Dude,
it's
can
making
you smash the pedal or no?
It's making you pace how
Can you
fast.
smash the pedal?
Outright? No.
There you go. So if you need to get the fuck out of the way or do something, you're fucked.
You need to control it.
You're on
basically.
baby mode.
No,
Turn
you
that shit off, man.
But the gas he's saving.
You can regulate yourself.
No,
Yeah.
it changes
You-
the timing of the gear
You'll know.
switches.
One day you'll know, and you'll
It
wish you never
literally,
had to
like,
know.
I read the manual, man.
You
Unlike
need
most
your
people,
fucking car to get out of the way, and you can't do it. That's when you'll know.
I have manual drive too.
But in the moment, you're on the
No,
highway.
but then
You're
as-
on the highway. Someone's gonna smash you. You need to fucking floor it. You're
Yeah.
fucked.
As you're
If
driving,
you're on the
more-
highway and you're already going that fast, that's not a problem.
You don't know what's gonna happen. You need to smash
no,
it.
no.
You can't
You-
smash it.
I think you're misunderstanding about.
Dustin, am I right? You're a driver
I've
of
never
cars.
used that, so I don't know.
No, I mean, have you ever had to smash it to get like go
Oh, yeah.
or move?
Yeah.
And which could have been bad if you couldn't get out of the way fast enough or
Sure.
something. Could happen. Okay, so
Yeah, there's
All
it's
it
gonna
does-
happen to you, and you'll be like,
No,
"I
no,
wish I
no,
didn't
you're
have a fucking
misunderstand-
piece."
you're
No,
misunderstanding
dude,
some- You're
no,
not even letting me talk.
you are misunderstanding. Sorry to say, man.
You're not even letting me talk.
I gave you a scenario.
Yeah.
When that scenario happens to you, what's your gonna be excuse?
The imagined
saying?
scenario was different than
Well-
the one you had in mind because now you're talking about being already
I
on the
got
highway.
rear-ended,
If you're on the highway,
but-
you're going already. That's not a problem. What it will stop you from doing is if you're stopped.
No.
If you're shut
Relative to someone smashing
Jesus.
into you, you're not going.
Shut up.
That's the point. Is you're not going.
Shut up for
no,
a
you're not
second.
already going.
Up, shut up for a second.
You need to be going
Shut up for a
20K
second.
faster, 30K
Jesus
faster,
Christ.
like right now.
Let the man explain.
Never. The premise is false. We can't let it continue.
You don't know what the
You gotta
premise
shut it
is.
down.
You don't know what the
Doesn't
premise
make any
is.
sense.
If you're sitting at 0K
You're not at
per
0.
hour, if you're sitting at 0K per hour,
Oh,
all
sorry,
this
man.
thing will do is if you were to press the pedal and squeal your tires and take off that way, it won't let you. It won't let you just take off from 0.
No, not from 0. Okay, so if you're at 100, it will let you.
That's what I was answering to.
It's got to enable a passing gear.
If
right?
you're already going almost
Then it
100K
doesn't-
or at K,
it's turned
then
off.
yeah, it doesn't fucking affect
Okay, I
anything.
didn't know that.
If you would have let him finish, Brian.
The only time you feel it is it will switch gears.
If you would have just said it.
It would switch gears probably at times that you kind of don't like, because that's how I feel about it mostly. Like certain inclines, I feel like it's in the wrong. It's making the wrong calculation. It's like it's either underpowered or overpowered in that one spot. That's the only way I could probably.
And you've
describe
tried
it.
that same hill with it off or on.
It's the anthill. Going
It's
from
pretty
like
steep.
going from the highway.
Yeah. So
back-
there's like
back
two
up.
different
Like
gearing
multi-shites or-
Yeah.
setups.
So the only thing that ever stops you from doing is squealing your tires to take off, because you'd be sitting in the same spot anyway. So what it's doing is it's stopping the squeal,
Oh.
lets you get traction, stops the squeal.
Okay, let's
gets
move on to
traction.
that. Let's say you're at a stop sign and someone is coming in real fucking hot. You already know there's no one, like, and you need to just fucking get the fuck out of the way.
Yeah, with what I just described,
Now
I
you're
don't
fucked.
I don't see how I could have gotten out of the way faster. The van is heavy enough that it will still just squeal on spot and still stay in one place. That it wouldn't matter whether the wheels are turning or not at that moment. Like, it just doesn't have the.
Squealing
it has
isn't-
too much
is
weight.
good. It has track control.
That's what it.
doesn't
That's what it is. That's
it
what
has
it's
track
tracking.
control.
That's what it's
So you
tracking.
might as well be at the edge of squealing, like at the very edge of it, to propel the fuck
Well, yeah,
forward.
it'll do that.
You can't do that anymore.
Yeah, no, it does.
Sorry.
I will do that.
No, you can't. It's economy mode.
Economy mode only changes when the gears switch. It changes
So you're
the
saying
speeds.
economy lets you squeal your tires, and that's all that it does if you turn it off?
No, that's a confusion of track control, I guess, with economy. The only thing economy is affecting, according to the manual, is the speeds at which the damn thing switches gears. So it does some
So it has
weird-
nothing
So
even
it
to
won't
do
let
with
it
that
get to
at
higher
all. Holy
RPMs before
fuck.
it switches gears.
Nothing to
Yeah.
do with RPM.
And that's why I feel it's wrong for that one incline on the hill, because it's always either undershoots it or overshoots it based on whatever calculation it's doing. I feel like if I turned it off, it would get better, but then I'd forget to turn it back on. It's good for most places, and I don't really give a
So
shit.
it's probably revving extra high whenever you're going up there. Is what you're saying.
So I'm either slowing down, or if it clicks in, I'm overshooting the speed.
Right.
So I can't keep it to a straight 50.
That's any
So I have to
any
do-
tuning of your transmission will have a particular profile for a certain hill slope.
Yeah. So
if you
I'm
take
like,
one setup or another setup and put them on the same hill, they'll perform differently and
Yeah.
chug in at different. Like let's say you want to cruise at one speed, but it just keeps bogging.
Yeah,
like keeps
it's
going
that.
up and down like that kind of shit.
It's that.
To try and maintain that, right? It can't.
So
do
the
it.
reason I don't bother with it is because that's like one place in the entire city that this is a thing. So I'm like, fuck it,
Right.
whatever. I don't care. It saves me on the gas.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I think traction control is what I was thinking, especially because I was thinking like stopped, not already moving. Yeah, if I had to like speed up like real fast, oh yeah, it'll go.
That was the impression that I got from it. When
My
you were saying
mistake-
economy mode.
My mistake was
Just,
initially is
gear
like I
ratios.
felt like I pressed the pedal hard enough because it just like it kicked, but then it slowed at 80 or something like that. It's still too heavy to like keep going.
Well, and then yeah, you would again.
And then I have to
hear it revving differently too.
And then I
right?
have to recalculate, so I'm like I'm not used to exactly the spots on the pedal.
The more you drive, you'll realize your timing and then the power, acceleration speed that you have.
Well, yeah,
Right, so
that's why I thought it
You'll
was
use the brakes less. You use the gas less. Right.
yeah,
Which preserves both.
for sure.
Right.
I'm like one of those annoying people that are like going up a hill. You don't see a brake light ever
Right,
until
of
like the
course.
very last minute,
Yeah.
and then you don't know. Am I supposed to slow down here?
Yeah. And that's how I drive
When you
throughout the
drive
city.
behind
It's like
them.
I won't even put my foot on the brakes until I know for sure I'm going to be stopping. Right. Whereas some people are like fucking hard on the gas, hard on the brakes.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
they're
yeah.
like racing between lights. It's like no.
Then you
just
gotta put
let your
gas.
car get up to speed. Right?
I fucking love
And
the
that's going to be more.
I love
economy.
annoying the people that are like trying to tailgate me, and then like I've watched them like lane changing anger and all of that shit.
Yeah.
I'm just going the speed limit, buddy. Like
Yeah.
okay.
And then you're stopped at the same light.
Exactly, and I'm like, the best scenario was this guy did that, and then I notice him at the next light, and he's like 3 cars behind me,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I see you've achieved your goals.
Yeah. Well, it's the same as like if I see a red light fucking 50 feet ahead, I'll let off the gas. I won't even fucking hit the brakes, and I'll like almost just let the car roll to.
Yeah, by the time you get there,
you know
we're
what I mean?
green already.
Yeah, and then it usually turns green.
Hypermiling.
What's that?
There's you could call it community or a meme. Hypermiling, getting like the absolute max out of every movement of your car.
Yeah.
Like
His
maximizing
min-
like
max.
Let off the
to
gas.
the drop of gasoline. Like
Yeah.
you're almost at
It is
the
min-maxing.
threshold of perfection.
World of Warcraft.
That's in all these games now.
Yeah.
Any
I
RPG
actually
kind of
recently
thing, right?
learned the term. I never bothered being part of those, but it was in relation to a cooking video of all things, and he's like talking about how he's cooking his $3 cheap steak with all like I'm just min-maxing everything. I don't want to clean up anything.
Yeah. What's the most attack I can get out of this steak?
Exactly. Have you heard of Helldivers 2?
No.
Have you heard of Helldivers?
I'm not a big gamer.
It's like all the rage right now. It took the fucking community by a storm. It's like the best AAA game to come out of the woodworks.
Like
That I-
AAA, what do you mean?
Looks good, plays good.
Oh, okay. S tier?
It has all of those monetizing things that you would normally associate with the big companies, but finally managed to do them in a way that
In-game
does...
purchases.
Yeah, but finally managed to do it in a way that does not actually piss anybody off, like, at all.
So you can be
And-
free to play and
And does
But it
not
doesn't make you like buff or like
no, it
able
doesn't.
to kill
Like,
shit out
it's
of anything.
everything is like so leveled out that like if you don't bother with that, you can just
grind it
you
out.
grind it out and you're good, and you don't even have to grind so much as play.
Okay.
Just play. Also, it's co-op, so it's like 4-player co-op.
Yeah, that was kind of an interesting thing.
No.
Dustin knows
factions.
about co-op.
No factions.
It's not like
Against
you're
each other.
fighting, well, not fighting other people directly, but it's like
It's a
They
horde,
have teams set
It's a
up.
horde shooter, so you have bugs, basically stormship trooper style,
Basically.
They're like
it's-
simulating war on other planets.
Can we show him the intro?
and,
Can we
um,
pause for like 2 seconds? And
they'll have like
indulge?
GMs, like game masters or whatever, you know, like
Oh yeah.
for like Dungeons and Dragons kind of idea.
Oh, okay.
The company is
Dungeon
putting up these scenarios, right, that you're joining in on with other people in your
Yeah.
team, and you're having like watching a campaign unfold. But there's like their system sets up a storyline or whatever, like the AI, and then you have humans tweaking like what's like strategic people, like what would the bug people be doing or whatever to attack the humans based on what they've been doing
Yeah.
now.
To the
Right,
level
so
Or
where
like an
AI
automated system couldn't really do that, right?
So to the level of some devs will actually join actual games, will watch what's going on, and like drop either extra help or
Try to balance
extra bugs or extra. Also, there's another side to it. So there's bugs. There's Terminator style hordes of robots that you
Nice.
gotta like go on the other side of the galaxy.
Okay.
Earth is in the middle. It's got like these two sides, and they'll like enable a zone. Within
Yeah.
the zone, you can go to a couple of different planets, and the entire storyline is like, how much democracy are you bringing to the galaxy?
Like Command and Conquer was kind of like that too, or no? Or StarCraft?
No.
Axis and Allies.
This is a bigger scale game. Like,
StarCraft maybe seems like
StarCraft
It's
was limited
just
to
the
some-
idea of aliens in space.
Yeah,
and
it was it was limited to a few
Like
star
diplomacy
systems,
and whatnot?
but it was limited to a few star systems.
Okay.
This one is like galactic, humanity's galactic war.
Jesus.
But it's
Yeah.
not. Is there a larger campaign to it?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So there's like a main storyline. There's like those individuals that will intercept individual missions.
No, I mean, like, does your game mean anything? You join a game and play it. Does that mean anything on the bigger world
yeah.
that you won or lost that?
You're looking whenever you go to a mission, you're looking at the real time progress of humanity versus.
Yeah. So
Versus the alien.
they've set up this world or universe.
And every battle actually affects the statistics you see. So other people fighting on the same planet will affect that planet's percentage of freedom.
Oh wow. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's really. And the funniest thing about this is the friendly fire, and man, is it plenty of it.
Yeah.
So you have like a gimmick there, mechanic, sorry, where you call in down stratagem. So you have like all these orbital ships that you're part of. Everybody's got their own orbital ship, and you call in a bombardment of any kind of sort, including nuclear, not limited to, but including nuclear. Fucking graphics are amazing.
Yeah.
On top of that, you have this mechanic where you can hug the other person. So what a lot of people do is they will set off a nuke, watch it explode, hug each other in the
and then take a selfie.
basically in the selfie
Nice.
kind of say, like, it's cinematics. It'll explode like that, and then there will be like the wave of damage,
Right.
and it'll be they hug, and then it's like, for freedom,
Oh,
for democracy,
Democracy.
manage democracy.
Oh man.
Yes. Has to be managed. We can't trust people too much.
Can we show him the trailer?
No, we can't watch
I'm
game trailer. No.
So it's 2 minutes of his time.
Dude,
How's that managed democracy?
there's
going
like
in,
we've
Okay,
got
I'm doing
we've
it.
got like half hour left, if any.
Okay, well, I'm gonna indulge our guest. I apologize in advance. You can mute it for now.
I'm not gonna mute it.
So it's on your phone?
It's YouTube.
Does it show you gameplay or just like cinematics?
It's just the first intro that I showed you.
Cinematics of it.
And if you've seen Starship Troopers, you'll really appreciate it.
Super Earth. Our
Super
home.
Earth, our home. I like that.
Prosperity. Liberty.
Super Earth?
Hi there. Democracy. Our way of life. Oh, hello. But freedom doesn't
The
come.
soldiers there.
Jesus.
Sweet liberty! No!
Liberty.
Very Starship Troopers.
Familiar? Scenes like these are happening all over the galaxy right now. You could be next. That it
Yep.
is, unless you make the most important decision of your
Are
life.
the bugs Mexicans?
Prove
in
to
this
yourself that you
scenario?
have the strength and the courage to be free. Join
Strength and the courage to be free.
Helldivers. Become part of an elite peacekeeping force. See exotic new life forms.
Blow them up.
And spread managed democracy
Managed.
throughout the
Just
galaxy.
having a bug in there.
Yeah.
Become a hero. Become a legend.
Jeez. A lot of satire going on
A
in this.
helldiver.
So, the game is exactly what you just saw.
But that's not gameplay, is it?
It's
Imposing your democracy on
it's
the
not.
world. All
Like,
right.
this intro is just a game commercial. They never advertised this game. Like, this game spoke for itself.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's
Require a new computer, latest gaming
yeah.
rig.
I'm not playing. I'm just watching.
Oh, you haven't started playing it?
No. But interestingly enough, like, I watch YouTubers play it, and like, they go from like this, this is all fun and games kind of a thing, to like them talking to like, on your west, got this guy over here. I got your supplies over there. They're
Right.
like becoming like militarized in a sense.
Right.
Not bad,
you
but
think
not
all
good.
this stuff is psyops?
No, I think this is just an outlet. It's a utilizable outlet by some sort of psyops. Not saying it's immune to it.
It's fun. To me, it's relates like the cooperative thing to like paintball. You guys ever paintball? Anybody? And like how you can strategize and like you could do mics and walkie-talkies and all that. Like you could be a unit,
Oh, fuck yeah.
right? Practice.
It's all
there's
practice
the-
for military applications.
Stress.
Airsoft and all that.
Life is stressful in and of itself. We have an instinct to respond to that stress. Most of that instinct has to do with collaboration.
Yeah.
That's just what it's picking up on. The fact that it's part of capitalism, well, nothing's perfect.
Well, simulations are interesting.
Right? Nothing is perfect.
You can use simulation model data in many different environments.
Yeah. Learning human nature and stuff.
Tactics.
Tactics, yeah.
What you find is a lot of camaraderie, so to speak, like forming, because like they're all overwhelmed by these aliens, so to speak, right? So there's a common experience, and then there's certain things you can do with each other.
Before you die, inevitably.
So like, so not only do you like have your initial weapons, you call your supplies for your heavier weapons. There's mechs now. On top of that, there's like different kind of loadouts. Where
How
it's
does
like
it- how does it go?
There's
Is
a
it,
two-person loadout, for example, where you have one person shooting, the other one grabbing the ammo, putting it back into the
Oh, fuck.
machine, and
Really?
you got to play together like that.
Yeah.
Like, do you just play until you die and then you respawn, or what's like the
So-
mechanic for?
So you're an anonymous soldier. You have a ship full of said soldiers, and every time you die, a
So you
reinforcement.
play one game at a time,
A reinforcement gets sent, and another helldiver takes its place. So it's
down to
like
the same scenario that's happening.
same loadout, same armor, same weapons,
With how many other people?
up to 4 in a single match.
But a scenario you're being put into something that's existing. There's
The-
already a battle between humanity and aliens.
So there's like zones.
What? Yeah.
Each zone has planets. Each planet has operations, and each operation is divided up into 3 missions. You complete the 3 missions, you win the operation. Operation contributes to the liberty score of that planet.
On a planet. This reminds me of your stuff, Dustin. Like trying to follow this.
Oh. Raid? Yeah. Raids too?
Yeah, just
Yeah,
like
Different way.
It's there's a lot of incentive to like keep going, and even if you drop out for a while and come back,
Like, do
there's
you
still-
pick that planet that you want to liberate that planet?
Yeah.
something?
So what will
Bring
happen?
democracy to
So what will happen is like up to 4 people would converge on a single ship, right? And they will interact amongst themselves on that single ship. bring in their own version of it. So there's like a 4-ship squad in space, up to. And when you play it, the way they set it up is that when you go to the host ship, somebody's like coming out from their own ship onto yours, and you start walking around. They're all nameless.
So is it like first-person shooter?
Third, so from the back.
Oh, okay.
So there is a first-person mechanic for the aiming part,
If you
the scoping,
like for yeah.
which works actually really well for this game, from what I understand. Yeah. Beyond that, it's like
You can probably set that too.
you collectively choose planet. You collectively choose where everybody's dropping, onto the mission site, and so you have like a choice of where you actually want to get dropped into.
Yeah, so you're getting together. It's like starting a mission, getting together. Okay, 4 players have joined.
Mhm.
Now everybody starts. You have your loadouts, which
The
you know
initial
one,
ones.
and then how
So
should we set
usually,
up?
Yeah, so usually you drop into a quiet spot, call in all of your heavier weaponry, or call in extra supplies, whatever the fuck you can put your hands on at that time. Start off, either split or stay together depending on which objectives you want to tackle. Each individual mission has its own ish. Simplest ones are just pure extermination ones.
Of course.
Survive and exterminate, and then leave.
Least delicate.
Simple.
And then there's like, then there's activate this device, activate that device, activate this device, activate that device. Come together, make sure that it's all working together. Defend the zone for a while, wait for it to actually do the activation, and then leave. So there's like variations on what the fuck you can do. And then you try to not nuke your friends.
Try and not nuke your friends.
Yeah, because you can drop a grenade. It's like this big. You drop a nuke, or you drop another orbital sort of strike. Like, so this game is so cinematic. Like, you get. So you saw how he shot the bug and he got the thing splashed on him.
Yeah.
So imagine that plus like background, like Vietnam style bombardments.
Jesus.
Yeah, and you call it in individually. So, and you have cooldowns for that. So you have to make sure that nobody of your friends is there, or you have to go reinforce them again.
Right. Neat.
So if you die, somebody has to go call in reinforcement, then you land again.
Crazy.
It's taken everybody by storm at this point.
What's it called?
Helldivers 2. Type in managed democracy. You'll get more than your load.
More than just the game.
Yeah. The lore there is that instead of voting for candidates, you vote for issues, and the AI will calculate what is being voted on and selects the candidate that best represents all the voted on issues. So managed democracy, and you're there to spread it.
Jeez.
For democracy.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah.
Oh man. But once the game gets intense, the actual in-game characters start to get like hyped up, and it's like, eat it, eat it.
Jeez.
They get all into
Just fanatical.
well, yeah,
Extremists.
Starship Troopers, man.
Yeah.
I think we'll hit another BRB.
Another mechanic that they put into it. It's
Are we building a religion?
Somewhat.
You try one of your tasty ones. Or I'll trade you.
Bones?
Yeah.
Just take one. I'm good.
Little cigar, no? Alright.
You know what? I'll keep it for later.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Just change it up, man.
Yeah, so back to reality, I guess.
Or games.
Part of reality. Games are in reality.
Simulations of reality.
Well,
That's what makes games exciting. They're simulations.
I did want to comment on that
Reality.
word at least. So, I'm assuming you're not a proponent of like the simulation theory, as it were. Like everything is a simulation idea. Because I'm certainly not trying
We're in
to.
a simulation
But
right
isn't
now.
it like
Yeah.
unprovable?
Well,
but at
so-
the same time, interesting as a term.
It's interesting.
Simulation. Yeah, it is
Well-
simulated. We simulate it. The brain simulates a
Yes.
copy of what's
Okay, yeah,
happening
yeah,
on the
yeah.
outside.
Yeah.
Of course, it's fucking simulated.
That I can get behind because, like, you know, the nervous system, the picture that it presents, isn't the thing that it's presenting
Itself.
clearly because
This
it's
is the
presenting. It's
the
presenting
toughest
it.
thing to explain to somebody ever.
What is that, logos? Or
Well, it's just an observation.
Just the fact of it.
Forget what do you call it. I'm looking at that picture right there, right? Like all that's happening really is that there's green, yellow, red, black light, not black light, but lack of light
Right.
coming into my eyes, and my head is forming another image of that image. So, yes, there is a real image over there, but the one that I'm actually referring to through my thoughts would be the one in my head.
it'd be the simulation.
So there's a disconnect. This is what we're trying to talk about as a dream. That's what we're referring to as a dream. There's like a simulation-ish by your brain created to simply keep track of the sensory input.
By like chunking everything and chunking in pieces and pieces, and this creates the terrain like a mountain
Right,
range.
so you see a whole face. You don't see a disconnected bunch of colors and dots.
There's
you
a
see
face there. There's a
Right,
light
your
there.
brain puts it
There's
together.
Coca-Cola there. A window.
The square of the
Yeah.
picture
There's
gets
bubbles.
put together. Every dot on the wall gets put together as a single dot. Like your brain will
How
put
about-
shit together.
How about that art where it's just like a bunch of dots and then you don't really see it unless your eyes are out of focus?
Just
I don't know
that-
what's
that's-
happening there,
that-
but
that-
it's
that's
your
a-
brain. Your
That's just
brain is also
that's just
creating
playing
That's
on
meta-
that's playing on the same concept.
It's interesting because it's metaphorical to the holonic principle or holonic model, where you just need a tiny piece of information in any one spot.
And your brain connects the rest.
It's kind of actually inverse of that.
No. Those are different concepts. Holographic principle is more about how no matter how small you cut up the pieces, you still get the same thing, just more blurry. Those images.
But like, hold on.
Those
Wait.
images are taking advantage of something else.
Hold on. We're talking about dots being like tiny dots coming together to create an image.
No,
Now
no,
it's
no.
as if
the image that you stare at
everything
like
has been
this-
carved out except for that little dot, but still we can see the image.
No,
Right?
that's-
The
I don't
details
think
have
that's what
been
he was-
removed
that's
down to just points,
I don't think that's what
and
you were
yet
referring
the
to.
image is still there.
yeah, well, I don't know. Like, I think it just feels like your mind is creating these pathways, right? Like, it has, like, the...
I don't think what you were describing and what he is describing are the same thing at all.
Maybe not.
So, correct me if I'm wrong. It's those you're talking about the images where like you have to kind of like bring them in, look past them at a
Oh,
point.
to
like,
see a 3D image pop out?
Yeah,
Yeah, some...
that right.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know about.
So you're
talking
Well, they
talking about
those-
holograms.
Like the one that... there's
Both
an episode
valid.
of Seinfeld about it.
but both work
Right?
still.
Yeah, both work in the way that they are prescribed to work, but that's not the same. You're not talking
Okay.
about the same thing.
Yeah, I'm not talking about 3D art. Or what? Is it?
No. They look 3D. When your eyes see the image encoded in them, they look 3D. I don't know the principles, anything about that. They could be connected. I
interesting.
don't
No,
know if
it's
they
a-
are.
Just by concept. I got triggered through that smooth transition between the same concept being there. The holographic principle. Using tiny bits of information to
Okay. To illustrate, the holographic principle is roughly the ability to put a 3D full image into a 2D picture. And that picture, if you were to wrap it around itself into a sphere, basically, so a 2D sheet, you shine your light through it, it gives you inside of it your hologram, your 3D image. So it's a 2D encoding, 3D image. The key about the holographic principle is that this picture can actually contain insides. So like you can picture an entire organism from all the way from the inside out, organs and all, even if you can't see them on the outside. So the hologram can contain the images on the inside of a 3D image that are not visible, from the surface of that image.
Right.
So that means you can encode the 3D space entirely in a 2D sheet of paper. And on top of that, if you happen to, like, say, cut this sheet of paper in half, and you were to do the same experiment with both pictures, you'll actually get the whole picture in both with slightly less details. And the more you do it, the more blurry the pictures get, but the whole thing is contained within them. And on and on and on and it goes. So the holographic principle is this, like, the whole is contained within the piece on the one end, and also the two-dimensional pieces contain the 3D space. And there is a physical connection to that, in that it actually works in physics out of all places. Like, there's a physicist's whole discussion about that. Leonard Susskind and Stephen Hawking, of all people, were engaged in this conversation. And it had a pretty interesting fallout, which is this holographic principle in physics. In fact, holograms work on that principle. That's the connection for the name.
How you can walk around it and it's all the details.
But even the insides, like, fuck.
How they
Like, you can have, like, the guts of a human being completely encased in that hologram and just not have any visual cue that it's there, because the encased visual...
You can't see through that. But you can probably, in theory,
Well, you can manipulate the
whole
hologram.
layers.
Yeah,
Okay,
obviously.
this is gonna be the skin, like underneath the skin. This is like.
Yeah, this is what I'm talking about. If you
Layering
cut it up,
models.
if you cut it up and stuff like that, it's the same image. Just this detail would be missing, or that detail. Or this detail is there, but it's not as detailed.
That brings up an interesting question of how do you delineate between one layer and another, or one part and another,
Well,
to try and view them separately.
I think that's a matter of protocol, language, and observation. But there is some kind of a light at the end of that tunnel, in that, at least according to... do you remember our resident mathematician? Nuop? Something to that effect? On Portal Mountain? Anyway, he raised the point that, at the very least, mathematically speaking, you need 2 dimensions. You can't go below 2. You need something to interpret the other something. So you need your sequence and you need your protocol. So what he's saying is basically, like, you can reduce spatial dimensions all the way down to 2.
But there's a limit
But not
of what's
further.
meaningful to even express a relationship between 2 things, at least.
Yeah, on the one-dimensional scale, it just becomes wishy-washy, nothing matters kind of a situation, mathematically speaking. So representation doesn't occur in a single-dimensional space. It only occurs in a 2-dimensional space, which we've taken as space and time.
I thought the other name started with a Z or an X or something.
Those are space.
Escaped me yet, so definitely our resident mathematician.
Is it NOOP? Anyway, he made a
How do you spell that?
no one. It's no one. N-O-N-E, I think. I think you'll recognize him if you've talked to him again.
Well, anyways,
Anyway, it
we
doesn't-
both
yeah, it
know
doesn't
who
matter.
we're talking about.
It doesn't
But-
matter.
Sorry, Dustin.
Anyway, he's mathematically inclined, and all he said is that you can't go below 2. It doesn't. Shit messes up. I'm inclined to believe him since he's got more experience in the field.
Sure.
Do I believe it like a belief system? It's just useful at the moment.
Yeah. Like you said, math can be used to calculate a lot of different things. Right?
It's math that was pointing out what he was talking about, how the energy dissipation works, and then the replicant structures are more equipped to dissipate the energy more efficiently.
Right.
And so the more complex and the more replicative the structure is, the more it has to play with, so to speak, and life
That's
happens.
why gold's so valuable.
That was a mathematician that made the argument entirely, like not a physician, not a physicist, not a biologist. He was just purely looking at it through mathematical terms and put out a theory, and lo and behold, we can actually observe it in a lab, because that's what molecules will do. They will form more complex structures if the energy is available, because the energy is available to form a complex structure. Why not? Especially if it coincides with what is asked for by the lot greater system, is to do this shit more efficiently.
Mm. How do you think humans were created?
What do you mean by created?
Well, we have like closed off sections of DNA, don't we? Where it's like there's certain things we know how to manipulate, but then there's other things like
So there used to be
How did that
several
even
human
happen?
species.
right.
They died off, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So which one are you talking about? Like,
Well, I guess
there was a milieu of human species. Only one of
Homo
them eventually.
erectus.
Almost anything.
Perchance.
Almost anything that came from. No, it's anything that came from that. There's a Denevisions, Neanderthals. Those are like the prime examples of actual humans. Not sapien. Homo sapiens, not Homo sapiens sapiens.
But did we evolve
Jesus.
from those? Or
Sapiens
No.
sapiens.
Brothers.
Right?
It's like a brother. We evolved from the same, quote unquote. It's like two brothers from the same mother.
Okay.
They're not the same family,
Right.
right? They got their own children. They got their
fathers,
own whatever. Potentially, it doesn't matter. The other strange thing is that we didn't like kill them off or anything like that. That's not what the record is showing. We basically rebred with them,
Mm.
and essentially like it all converged onto a single lineage at the end of the thing,
And
because
then that created Homo sapiens.
the modern human, like some more different than others, because like you and I, Brian and whatever, the Caucasian side of it, for example, we have more Neanderthal in us than say anybody from Africa. Conversely, if you take any two random people from Africa, they will have more genetic variants in their DNA structure than any two people, say take one from Europe, take one from Asia. Those will have more genetic similarities than two random people from Africa.
Probably closer.
No, like so significantly close that the speculation is that only one single tribe out of Africa populated both Europe and
Well, that's
Asia.
that like diaspora kind of everything.
It also says that the vast majority of humanity never left Africa. The only people outside of Africa are a small tribe that is diversified further. So it's like another speciation, but not speciation.
Mm-hmm.
So like there's like this whole
Yeah, but they've even got, like, even in Africa, how many different, you want to say species? Because, like, you look at, like, pygmies, or, like, then there's, like, super, super tall ones, right?
So, okay, to
Tribes, say, you know what I mean?
to be classified as a species is that you can interbreed with your own,
Right.
but if you interbreed with something else, and even if that produces an offspring, it has to be fertile.
Right.
So, like, if a horse and a donkey mate,
The mule, but mules
get-
can't breed,
exactly.
right?
So you can call donkeys and horses very closely related,
Right.
but they're not the same species. Another way to understand it.
Yeah, and I guess if the two tribes bred, they'd be able to produce their offspring.
So for the human branch of it, they did interbreed and they did provide viable offspring. Therefore, they were the same species.
Right.
So with Neanderthal and Homo sapien and all of that stuff, it's categorically the same species. It might have not been had the same viability, because what we do know is that it was our women that were able to carry their children to term more frequently. So we got the vast majority of the DNA, and they got like maybe 4% into the whole scheme of things at the end of the day. So, which is probably what led to them disappearing eventually, because we kept interbreeding.
Right.
But what came out was
There would- yeah.
more of us than them.
The amount of purebred kind of
Yeah,
genetics.
but it wasn't like a violent war or anything. It was a love war, so to speak.
That's a
Who's
nice
to
story.
say, really, but
No, we obviously don't know, but we don't find a whole lot of evidence for a violent takeover,
right.
which is the assumption. We have that assumption going into the history of it, but we don't find the evidence for it.
Right.
So we're left to
Well, and then
sort of figure that out. And
but-
love seems a little bit more available.
I think, but honestly, that
If nobody wants to get pissed.
it's out there that there's been a lot of interventions throughout. Alien, kind of something
Those kind of
How many?
narratives-
There's like thousands of year old fucking cave paintings of things that
yeah.
The flying
solar
saucers?
systems laid out, like fucking
Flying
crazy
saucers?
shit. Yeah.
Do you know what most cave paintings really are?
Where to find certain food, I think.
Yeah, look, see those signs right there?
Yeah.
That's literally what most cave paintings are about. They're like, at this time of year, you find
Here's a cave painting.
food
As a
here.
reference to
It's a road
If
sign.
you're ever
It's a road
abducted by
sign.
aliens and you need a drink,
Yeah. Yeah, but that's what they are. Like,
But I don't know, like, again, I may be getting too out there, but it seems like there's been some alien intervention
draw
at certain
this.
points.
If you draw this,
Right.
what would make an alien though? Like that's the weird thing. to
when
me.
you're on the
maybe-
table and
maybe
you
we
draw
aren't
this,
actually from this planet.
Yeah, but again, like, what's the pull towards that explanation versus something a little bit more basic?
Well, how you look at 10,000 years ago, certain civilizations, how advanced they were. How did these people that supposedly didn't have electricity, but yet they figured out ways to communicate with other people thousands of kilometers away, right?
yeah, this
India.
means
So,
thumbs up
look
is
at
good,
India.
thumbs down is bad.
So first, I'd have to ask the question of, how do we know they communicated, as opposed to say
Because they're
No, hold on, hold on.
taking these drawings
Hold on, hold
for
on. I'm not
technologies and they're replicating it.
I'm not done.
and okay, I'm telling
So-
you how, but
So
Okay,
how
just
do-
skip
how
to
do-
the chase, Jenny.
How
Just
do we
state
know
it-
that they're
say it.
communicating something profound rather than expressing the basic of human experience in and of itself, which humans being human over here and humans being human over there would find correlation with? So I'm asking,
they've
like,
got more of a connection to the natural world, I think, and they realize the power of like crystals and certain elements
All right.
and alchemy.
So if we go
Right.
back, to the ancient timelines, is it more? Is it not more feasible to say that the further back you go, the more the connection to nature's like intertwined into
Oh,
your
100%.
whole being?
Yeah.
So again, like, what's alien there?
Well, maybe they
I'm not even refuting your point. I'm
well,
asking.
but to go from caveman to fucking intergalactic communication, say. How can a
big
guy? Okay, how can you perfectly
5 minutes.
draw a picture of a fucking solar system?
Are you
that-
picturing some kind of gradual development?
I'm
Because that's not what it is.
it seems like from things I've seen,
Start with
right, that
start with agriculture.
there's been some kind of intervention.
Start with the idea of agriculture. What does it require?
Land and seeds,
What's on
Soil.
land? What's on land?
soil, I don't know, trees,
People.
people.
So what do? Remove them.
Okay, sure.
What is our archaeological evidence is saying with regard to the shift from, say, from Stone Age to agriculture? It was sudden. You don't see a
how did they discover it,
you
though,
don't see a
right?
There's a okay. I can go into that if you want.
Well, evolution,
The
whatever.
ice age recedes, and for the first time in human history, fields of grass become actually accessible.
True.
Competition begins with regard to who can take control of the large fields.
Right.
A few thousands of years later, what we're seeing is that the people that took control of the fields have no room for anybody who doesn't play by their rules. What you see is mass extermination. So effectively, anything that is not called civilization gets erased off of the fucking face of the planet.
You're saying that, but
No,
for sure.
No, this, like, I'm repeating archaeological findings
Okay.
and their conclusions. What they're pointing towards, essentially, is that you don't see a shift, a gradual shift in any area from your non-agricultural,
Hunter-gatherer.
you just see them erased off of the fucking face of the planet. And
A lot of it
at
could
the same
be
time, you see
natural
you see
events
that
from
whatever
comets and-
empire is at the time is
Yeah.
countering. So what didn't happen is that there was no gradual shift within areas towards agriculture. Is that there were shifts towards agriculture in some areas, and those areas exploded in their need for workforces because agriculture requires labor.
Right.
Their hunger for labor made them go, okay,
Feast
who can we get
Now we're
into
getting into
this
the beast economy.
without fucking
Okay. Well,
repercussions?
that's fine and dandy. I'm not arguing that fact, but how do you explain these ancient technologies and then even
Like
just
what-
the way that
what
they built
ancient
things?
technology?
How did the pyramids that were built, however so many years ago, the rocks
How did
from
they
it
move the
came
rocks?
from fucking 500 miles away, say.
There's lots of mechanical versions of that theme. Most of them are workable. I don't know what the issue is.
But if we can't replicate the
We can.
ancient building processes that they've got,
we can.
Yeah.
What
for
ends up
one
happening?
in a
one
modern
example,
society,
here's
what-
one example. If you have a flat, like say a platform that you can put these rocks on, and to have a mechanism where you have like say almost like just even a pebble in the very center of the rock, then you can twist the entire
Pivot,
rock.
yeah.
And then you have another pebble, which is like your other balancing point. So you twist it that way.
And then
Then
how
you
do you-
bring the pebble over this
Yeah,
way.
that's to move it
and
in
you keep the
place.
platform underneath it. You can keep moving like tons and tons of fucking material.
So,
There's all kinds of ways.
One thing
If you
that-
have a stable society, though, that's the question to me. Why was there a society stable enough to do all that? Like,
Well-
what was the constitution of it? Were people like, did they all agree to it, or like, how do you have that power over
Never,
people?
Don't
and-
underestimate emergence, man. They believe their shit. They actually believe.
Yeah, like, I'm not saying,
they
like-
believe the connection of their stories.
I'm
to
just
nature.
wondering, like,
But
what
to
what
gods
actually
and
allowed.
others too,
which were
supernatural.
It's like what allowed that.
Supernatural.
If you look at their views of the supernatural and their views on nature, you'll start to find the connection between the thinking process and their
Yeah.
motivations.
But-
But on top of that, not only the pyramids were created in Egypt, they were created across the world.
Within
the
there's
same
very
time.
similar
Right.
structures.
And the common theme that I find in all of these people asking this question is that they always underestimate the ingenuity of the human being
Right.
at that time. They are thinking to themselves
Maybe, yeah,
that
no,
the
for
kind
sure.
of person that it would have been then must have been so much more primitive
Right.
with their ideas and their
thoughts and
cognitions.
mind.
Right. Yeah,
Meanwhile,
it's not that long
they're
ago.
witnessing the very opposite of
Well,
that, and they
It's like
can't
the same
fucking believe
DNA
it.
practically.
yeah.
And they can't believe
like
it.
so again, got back to the Indians. Like they were making telescopes and shit like that. They didn't even have fucking glass back then. Like for what we can consider, you know what I mean? So how can you make a lens that can show you space back
You
then?
know what to look for.
right? But I'm saying there's got to be
So-
some
so-
kind
so-
of
so
other
like the whole-
interventions.
I'm not. I'm,
So
I'm,
is there a natural
I'm not
glass
go-
like thing? Yeah, like quartz maybe or crystals. Yeah, you can
Yeah.
polish that into things and see
look,
that
check
things
this
get
out.
magnified.
I'm not a homeotherapist in any stretch of the imagination.
Homeotherapist.
I will tell you to
I
take
don't
an
know what that is even.
I wasn't about to
I will
book
tell
a
you to take
session.
an Advil before I'll tell you to take anything else if you have a pain problem.
Right.
That's my point there. Every fucking drug we have comes from nature. See the contradiction in my statements.
Yeah.
Right. Like.
Yeah, no,
The-
it's all the ingredients
there
come
is-
from natural things.
There
yeah.
is that avenue. I'm just not
Yeah.
willing to like be wishy-washy about it. I just want to know like the specifics. Advil is one of those specifics.
For sure.
It's a studied natural fucking process.
Usually, I think people would look at the history of a certain compound of chemical. If it's
Heroin.
been with us for a long time and we've always processed it from plants as people, our environment, we've had access to this, okay, it's been tested. If
Right.
it's something from a new process, that's something different to watch for.
fentanyl.
Okay.
Watch out for
Yeah.
Be careful.
I don't know. I just after seeing a lot of different evidence and like crazy shit.
Gents,
That's,
though.
how can you explain it? It's
Sure.
leading me to believe, and a lot of other people to believe that there's
No.
some kind of alien
I-
forces
I can accept that,
stepping in at certain
but
points.
you understand my question is like I don't know why that would be alien.
It's
Well, because it's like from some other planet.
E.T.
But no,
People
but
came
again,
on their
extraterrestrial.
But
spaceship.
again, like I'm not willing to underestimate humanity on its own.
Yeah,
terms
we think
from
that
back then.
we're weird enough
Hence-
to explain what happened. That's what I think is the moral of the story from Jenya's perspective. But I also appreciate Jenya, Dustin, what you've brought with the questioning of it, of the possibility of who knows what's out there. You know, the
Right.
X-Files. I want to
I think
believe.
that there's more at play, right?
Well, sure, but
But
then
we're all
but
connected
to
then
the
it's like
universe.
but then it's like it's
We're
like
connected
saying
to the universe
okay, we can't
in
ask.
more ways than we know.
When you
right?
do that though, you kind of also positioning yourself in a like
That's
there are
a
some
good
questions that will not have answers at all.
There are answers out there. I'm not saying
But if they're
Right, to
but
have an
if they're
opinion,
this if they're not extrinsic to our source, then that means they're not accessible in any way.
like, we're not
if they're
making a
alien,
deal with some
well,
alien
If they're
here
alien and we don't
right
have
now.
contact with the alien, for example,
What's the
right?
point of thinking about it?
Then-
or we're the aliens, right? And we were
but
put
again,
here.
but
Um,
again, you don't have
people,
a-
I hate to cut it short,
how do you
but
verify that?
Yeah, no, it's
we're pretty much out of here. Ride's here. Can't
Okay.
leave anybody waiting. So I'd like to say thank you to all gentlemen,
yeah,
peoples.
I feel like it's a
uh,
neat conversation. to
everybody
have,
out
'cause
there.
It's just like
who's
Yeah,
been following
like-
along today. We had
And it's not a criticism on your position or anything else. Like
a great time.
I don't take it
and
personally.
Yeah.
we'll see you in a couple weeks,
I'm
ideally.
only like trying to.
And February 2025. That's the prediction for the 100th episode. Anyways,
It's a milestone.
Yeah, what I'm trying to say is that, like,
peace out.
if I have a choice between